We are hearing the closing arguments for the impeachment trial today. So, this should be even more ridiculous than yesterday. Let's see my broken headphone here. So yeah, I'm gonna eat breakfast and also let these dummies, talking heads, talk out of their heads, and yeah, we'll see what they got going on.
To actually learn more about what happened that day. They've been making these kinds of threats for a couple of weeks now. Lindsey Graham has been doing this on Fox News at night, talking about how they might call people who bear no influence on this whole process. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, there was actually a time where he was talking to Sean Hannity about that. But the idea that we wouldn't want to learn more about the situation from witnesses like that is really just a commentary on this process. Muriel Bowser and Nancy Pelosi, and when they asked for National Guard, may not be a terribly important question when it comes to the actual incitement here, but actually learning about the timeline of things and maybe getting some clues from the Capitol Police, from Defense Department officials, the former Defense Secretary, about how all this process played out on the day of January 6th, even the days before, would be valuable when it comes to figuring out exactly what happened. And so I just think it's a little bit odd that these things are being held out there as a threat. And I think it's, it also puts some pressure on Democrats, because now if they don't call witnesses,
Back at it like a crack addict,
have been, successfully threatened by the Trump legal team for all this time. So certainly not a great situation for them as they confront a key decision today on calling witnesses.
Rhonda Colvin, our colleague Mike DeBonis is on Capitol Hill today and has heard from Lisa Murkowski, the senator of Alaska, saying this: a lot of us are curious about the situation with the vice president. So it sounds like still questions unanswered. When asked about witnesses, she said, "I'll listen to any argument." So she's not advocating for it, but she's willing to listen and entertain the conversation, Rhonda. What do these senators do if they still have unanswered questions in this moment?
Well, they could vote for witnesses if that's what they feel would get them some answers. But the point that Murkowski is still bringing up, Pence, it really raises an interesting point that the time that the impeachment managers spent on the danger that Mike Pence was in, showing the video that had not been seen before, looking at the Trump timeline of when he knew Mike Pence was in trouble and when he eventually sent out that video tweet. That seems to be the most concerning issue right now out of all the issues that the impeachment managers spent 2 days on. I mean, they brought up how this makes us look on the world stage and the cost that it's taken to fortify the Capitol as well as other U.S. capitals or other state capitals. I mean, they've done so much over the last 2 days, but the one thing that seems to be sticking in people's minds is that issue with Pence, that it appears that if the impeachment manager's argument is that it appears that Trump abandoned his vice president. Also,
so the thing about that, Donald, is that
in danger, because you also had the
people like Ted Cruz, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz,
as well as Nancy Pelosi, who
obviously Marjorie Taylor Greene,
if something were to happen, they were also in danger. So
Andy Harris
really
from Maryland.
We spent a lot of
all
Wednesday
those people
talking about the fact that the impeachment managers
are equally culpable
using
in this.
Pence a lot, and I think when we look
So
back
if
at
they
how this
admit
impeachment trial
that
played out and how it was argued,
Trump
that was,
incited the
a very
riot
critical part of the impeachment
by
manager's
perpetuating
argument is that,
the lie
that, seemed
that
to
the
work
election was
among the
stolen.
Republicans.
Aaron Blake, you've been
Their
focused
heads are on the
in your
chopping
writing
block
for the
next,
fix,
because
the question of the timeline and the serious questions
there
that
will
still
be
remain.
consequences
Do you
for
anticipate
all
we'll get
of
any
the
more clarity
senators
on
who
that
perpetuated that same lie.
Probably not if there's any witnesses called. Certainly the Trump legal team hasn't been willing to expound too much on that.
They can't.
I thought it was really interesting yesterday.
A vote to
that,
convict is an
to the
admission to
extent
guilt
we
on their
had
part. So they're not
lawmakers
gonna do that.
asking sincere questions, trying to get more information. They generally came from these more middle of the road Republican senators who are open to conviction. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins asked, of course, about when Trump knew that there was a significant danger to lawmakers. And Michael Van der Veen essentially responded that, well, he tweeted at 2:38 p.m., but we have to do more investigating. There hasn't been an investigation. Well, you can talk to your client about these things. The timeline is a very basic thing to go over the moment you take up a client. Then, of course, we had Mitt Romney asking about whether the president knew that Vice President Pence was in danger when he tweeted what he did at 2:24 p.m. At this point, Van der Veen actually had an answer, and he said, no, the president didn't know. So how do you know that the president did not know about Vice President Pence's peril, but you also don't know when he actually came to appreciate the situation in the Capitol? All of these things that could be answered or at least shed light upon if you called witnesses. Without that, it's just going to be kind of an amorphous blob that we still don't know a whole lot about. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing senators like Sheldon Whitehouse and Jeff Merkley start to lean a little bit more on their colleagues to call witnesses.
Yeah, thanks, Asian Bruce Willis.
We're
you
just
too.
not going to find that stuff
I was
out
just making
today
myself some
unless we
breakfast. What's
actually
good,
have
Thanos?
some
Snap.
witnesses called, but of course they don't want to drag out this process, given that the outcome seems to be preordained.
All right, senators filtering in
Made
to
myself
the
a
chamber.
bacon, egg, and
James
cheese.
Homan, if people have just joined us in the last few minutes, let's jump off that point that Aaron was making, the very important point that the heart of the big question that a lot of the moderates who might be open to conviction have is the timeline of what President Trump did in the immediate aftermath, and those hours, actually, not even minutes, but hours, as the attack was unfolding live on national broadcast, when the president, instead of demanding that the rioters stop, instead of clearly sending in national militarized help, was tweeting disparaging comments about Mike Pence. So we heard, as Aaron said, Trump's lawyer yesterday say he did not know. No, he did not know that Pence was in danger, but that does not square with all the reporting and the timeline that's been laid out, including by other senators who talked to President Trump.
Yeah, and what's amazing about all of that, Libby, is that Mike Pence continues to be loyal to Trump through this. Pence's team.
Yeah, that's insane to me.
They told our colleagues, like, the Trump lawyer was lying, that Trump did know, and he didn't care, and he didn't
Trump
do anything.
absolutely
He didn't
knew.
check on Pence. The only time that Trump ended up finding out Pence was okay was when Mark Short, who was Pence's chief of staff, called Mark Meadows, who was Trump's chief of staff, to tell him that they were safe. But this was kind of an hour after what we're talking about. Trump never inquired. But you know, it is remarkable that, you know, a lot of these senators know this to be true. They know Mike Pence. He used to be in Congress for a decade, and so they are still going to vote to acquit. But these people who are on the margin, who are taking this seriously, you know, they've all taken oaths to render impartial justice. I think that this is the kind of the decisive thing, because it speaks to Trump's state of mind. You know, that we've talked a lot about the legal standard and the constitutional.
I don't know if they had
for
video of that,
inciting,
but
an insurrection.
it's very, very hard for me to
If
believe. It's a
Trump
super
didn't
stretch
care,
to
that
ask me to
his
believe that
number two was in grave
while the
jeopardy,
whole
and
world
Trump
knew what was
didn't
going on,
want to
the
do
president
anything to
was the
stop
one
it.
person
It
who
does
did not know
make
what was
it
going
look
on.
like he was trying to, or was certainly at the very least happy with his supporters who he had just spoken to an hour earlier, breaching the Capitol and seizing the Senate chamber.
We're seeing the live feed of the Senate floor right now, and you can see the attorneys for President Trump getting ready, also the impeachment managers preparing as they anticipate making their closing arguments.
Yeah,
today.
he
The
knew.
first
There's no
order of
way he
business
didn't
is this
know.
question of witnesses, and if anyone will bring up a motion to call witnesses, the Senate will
If you think
debate
Trump
and
didn't
vote
know
on
that
They could hear a
Pence
debate
was
and
being
vote on
evacuated when he sent that tweet,
but we'll
you're
see
either
if
stupid
anyone even
or a
brings that
liar.
up. We're hearing from some Democrats on the Senate say they'd like to see witnesses, but whether that will actually culminate in a discussion and a debate on the floor today remains to be seen. And then at that point, we can move into the closing arguments after some other procedural things. Rhonda Colvin, just in the moment we have here as we prepare for the Senate to convene, this could wrap up today, Rhonda. We could see a final vote today.
It very well could wrap up today, and that is far different from last time when they did closing arguments. They also, if you remember, there was also the State of the Union address that evening, and then the next day they came in and voted. So
okay, Rhonda, we'll hold off now. I'd like to thank Rhonda, James, Aaron, Senator Leahy, Senate Pro Tem, who's presiding over this.
Thank you, Donald.
And we can see Chaplain Barry Black heading up. He's been starting every morning with a prayer that has been
people were
message, frankly, to
1,000%
senators
adding him
as they
on
begin
Twitter
to start
too.
their day.
There's no
Let's
way
watch.
Trump didn't know about any of this, and it's about to start. So I guess we're going to hear the closing comments or the closing remarks here, or closing arguments.
O Lord our God, yesterday this chamber reverberated to a standing ovation for the courage of Officer Eugene Goodman in defending this building and human life. May our legislative jurors strive to emulate his courage in their defense of the United States Constitution. Lord, touch and move them to believe that the end does not justify the means. Help them to remember that the end is inherent and built in to the means. Fill our senators with a spirit that combines
He's just standing there coughing.
common sense with commitment, conscience, and courage. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
What up, Raccoon?
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes.
Yes. Senators, please be seated.
Did you just say I
If
miss my
there's
wife?
No objection. The journal proceedings of the trial are approved to date, and I'd ask the Sergeant at Arms to make the proclamation.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons are commanded to keep silence on pain of imprisonment while the Senate of the United States is sitting for the trial of the article of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives against Donald John Trump, former President of the United States.
And pursuant to the provisions of Senate Resolution 47, the Senate has provided up to 2 hours of argument by the parties, equally divided, on the question of whether or not it shall be in order to consider and debate under the impeachment rules any motion to subpoena witnesses or documents. Are both parties ready to proceed at this point?
Don John. Yeah, Patrick Leahy, he's yikes.
They may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Senators. Over the last several days, we presented overwhelming evidence that establishes the charges in the article of impeachment. We've shown you how President Trump created a powder keg, lit a match, and then continued his incitement even as he failed to defend us from the ensuing violence. We've supported our position with images, videos, affidavits, documents, tweets, and other evidence, leaving no doubt that the Senate should convict. We believe we've proven our case. But last night, Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler of Washington State issued a statement confirming that in the middle of the insurrection, when House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called the president to beg for help, President Trump responded, and I quote, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are." Needless to say, this is an additional critical piece of corroborating evidence, further confirming the charges before you, as well as the president's willful dereliction of duty. And
Raise your
desertion
hand
of
if you're
duty
surprised by
as
that.
Commander-in-Chief of the United States, his state of mind, and his further incitement of the insurrection on January 6th.
Wow,
For that
yo.
reason, and because this
Wow.
is the proper time to do so under the resolution that the Senate adopted
Justin? Good
to
morning.
set the rules for the trial, we would like the opportunity to subpoena Congresswoman Herrera regarding her communications with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, and to subpoena her contemporaneous notes that she made regarding what President Trump told
It's wild
Kevin
to me
McCarthy
that
in
they
the middle
waited
of
till
the
today
insurrection.
to bring this
We would be
up,
prepared to
but-
proceed by Zoom deposition of an hour or less, just as soon as Congresswoman Herrera Butler is available, and
Oh,
to
I
then
guess it
proceed
makes sense.
to the next phase of the trial, including the introduction of that testimony shortly
You would
thereafter.
wanna end
Congresswoman
off
Butler
with
further
this, too.
stated that she hopes
I mean, they've
other
already
witnesses
slam dunked this
to
case over the
part
last
of
3
the
days,
story, other
but-
patriots, as she put it, would come forward, and if that happens, we would seek the opportunity to take their depositions via Zoom, also for less than an hour,
nice.
or to subpoena other relevant documents as well.
So they actually found testimony from someone who called Trump
President.
to beg
Thank
him
you.
for help during
Senators, good morning.
the insurrection.
And good
he
morning
said,
to the American people.
I guess these people are more upset about the election
First
than you
thing I
are.
want to say on the issue of witnesses is that the House manager just got up here and described the articles of impeachment and the charges. There is no plural here. That's wrong. There's one article of impeachment and there's one charge, and that's incitement of violence and insurrection. What you all need to know and the American people need to know is, as of late yesterday afternoon, there was a stipulation going around that there weren't
This man
gonna
is
be
arguing
any
semantics.
witnesses.
He really
But
is the goofiest guy
after
ever.
what happened here in this chamber yesterday, the House managers realized they did not investigate this case before bringing the impeachment. They did not give the proper consideration and work. They didn't put the work in that was necessary to impeach the former president.
This guy has just been asleep the
But-
last 3 days, I guess.
If they want to have witnesses, I'm going to need at least over 100 depositions, not just one. The real issue is incitement.
This man is so
They
goofy.
Put into their case
This man is
over
so
100 witnesses,
goofy, yo.
people who have been charged with crimes by the federal government.
What's up,
And
Malvern?
each one of those, they said that Mr. Trump was a co-conspirator with. That's not true. But I have the right to defend that. The only thing that I ask, if you vote for witnesses, do not handcuff me by limiting the number of witnesses
This dude is
that I
salty.
can have. I need to do a thorough investigation that they did not do. I need to do the 911 style investigation that Nancy Pelosi called for.
The dramatic, do not handcuff me.
It should have been done already. It's a dereliction of the House manager's duty that they didn't. And now at the last minute, after a stipulation had apparently been worked out, they want to go back on that. I think that's inappropriate and improper. We should close this case out today. We have each prepared our closing arguments. I had 8 days to get ready for this thing, but we each had those 8 days equally together to prepare ourselves. And the House managers need to live with the case that they brought. But if they don't, please, in all fairness and in all due process, do not limit my ability to discover the truth.
This guy
That
is
would be
dumb.
another sham.
He's mad.
And that's the president's
He's
position.
super mad,
my
big
position.
mad.
Mr. Askin.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, this is the proper time.
Both,
that we were
Malvern.
assigned
¿Por
to
qué no
talk
los
about
dos?
witnesses. This is completely
¿Por qué no los
within
dos?
The course of the
Dude is
rules set
crazy
forth by
and
the Senate.
angry.
There's nothing remotely unusual
He knows he's getting
about
cooked.
this. I think we've done an exceedingly thorough and comprehensive job with all the evidence that was available. Last night, this was breaking news, and it responded directly to a question that was being raised by the President's defense counsel, saying that we had not sufficiently proven to their satisfaction, although I think we've proven to the satisfaction of the American people, certainly, that the President, after the breach and the invasion took place, was not working on the side of defending the Capitol, but rather was continuing to pursue his political goals. And the information that came out last night by Congresswoman Butler, apparently backed up by contemporaneous notes that she had taken, I think will put to rest any lingering doubts raised by the President's counsel, who now says he wants to interview hundreds of people. There's only one person the President's counsel really needs to interview, and that's their own client.
Right. Thank you for the
And
follow, Malvern.
bring him forward, as we suggested last week, because a lot of this is matters that are in his head. Well, why did he not act to defend the country?
They cooked him with that.
after he learned
Jamie Raskin's
of the
he's been
attack?
cooking
Why
all
was
week.
he continuing to press the political
But
case?
that was heat
this
right
piece
there.
Of evidence
Like,
is
yo, you
relevant.
only need one witness, and he is in Florida golfing right now.
And finally, but I was a little bit mystified by the point about the article of impeachment, which I referred to. The dereliction of duty, the desertion of duty, is built
It's
into
all good, Malvern.
the incitement
If you have any
charge,
questions, I can explain it
obviously.
to you.
If the President of the United States is out inciting a violent insurrection, he's obviously not doing his job at the same time. Just like if a police officer is mugging you, yeah, he's guilty of theft and armed robbery, whatever it might be, but he's also not doing his job as a police officer.
That's facts.
So it's further evidence of his intent and what his conduct is.
That's facts.
If I may.
Counsel?
First of all, it's my understanding, it's been reported that Mr. McCarthy disclaims the rumors that have been the basis of this
you're in the
morning's
UK,
antics,
Malvern?
but
Yes,
really
you
the
have a whole
rumors
other
that
set.
have
You
been
got,
the basis
you
of
got
this
Boris
entire
over there to deal
proceeding.
with.
This entire proceeding is based on rumor, report, innuendo. There's nothing to it, and they didn't do their work. Just
That's
like
is
what
that all
happened
he's
with
gonna
Ms.
say,
Lee
yo?
2
That's
or
what.
3
That's just
nights
what he
ago.
keeps falling back
Some
on. It's like they didn't do the
supposed
work,
conversation
even though we
that
watched
happened,
3 days worth
and they
of
had
heat.
to withdraw that. They had to back off of that because it was false. It was a
Nicola
false
Sturgeon.
narrative.
Oh, bet.
But it is one article of impeachment. Yeah, they threw a lot of stuff in it in violation of Rule 23. Rule 23 says you cannot combine counts. It's a defect in their entire case. It's one of the 4 reasons why you can vote to acquit in this case. Jurisdiction, Rule 23, due process, and the First Amendment. They all apply in this case. Let me take my own advice and cool the temperature in the room a little bit.
Yo cooked himself. That's how you know you lost, yo. Were you cooking yourself?
It's about the incitement. It's not about what happened afterwards. That's actually the irrelevant stuff. That's the irrelevant stuff. It's not the things that were said from the election to January 6th. It's not relevant to the legal analysis of the issues that are before this body. It doesn't matter what happened after the insurgents into the Capitol building, because that doesn't have to do with incitement. Incitement it's a point in time, folks. It's a point in time when the words are spoken.
Yeah, this is live,
and the
Malvern.
words say, implicitly say, explicitly say, commit acts of violence or lawlessness. And we don't have that here. So for the House managers to say we need depositions about things that happened after, it's just not true. But if he does, there are a lot of depositions that need to be happening. Nancy Pelosi's deposition needs to be taken. Vice President Harris's deposition absolutely needs to be taken, and not by Zoom. None of these depositions should be done by Zoom. We didn't do this hearing by Zoom. These depositions should be done in person, in my office, in Philadelphia. That's where they should be done.
Wild.
I don't know how many civil lawyers are here, but that's the way it works, folks. When you want somebody's deposition, you send a notice of deposition, and they appear at the place where the notice says.
Philadelphia.
That's civil process. I don't know why you're laughing. It is civil process.
He's getting
That
laughed
is the
at
way
right now.
lawyers do it.
He's mad.
We
He's
send
getting
notices
cooked.
of deposition. In the notice of
I would remind everybody that we will have order in
I don't have
Oh my God,
chamber
yo. He just sat down. Look how defeated he
during these
looks.
proceedings.
I haven't laughed at any of you. And there's nothing laughable here. He mentioned
He's
my
mad.
client coming
He's
in
mad.
to testify. That is not the way it's done. If he wanted to talk to Donald Trump, he should have put a subpoena down. Like, I'm going to slap subpoenas on a good number of people if witnesses are what is required here for them to try to get their case back in order, which has failed miserably for
It hurt his
4
feelings.
reasons. There is no jury.
He's hurt. He's in his feelings right now.
There has been no due process.
He was already in his feelings,
have
then they laughed at him.
Completely
Yikes.
violated and ignored and stepped on the Constitution of the United States. They have trampled on it like people who have no respect for it.
This
And
man
if this is about
wild.
nothing else,
This
it
man
has to be about
is
the respect
OC.
of our country, our Constitution, and all of the people that make it up.
Yeah, this dude is
So that I
super
ask
brain dead.
when
It's
considering
quite
voting
humorous,
on this,
Raccoon.
Witness matter, and to be clear, this may be the time to do it, but again, and everybody needs to know
That
I'm
did
about
fade.
politics. I'm not so much into it all, and I'm not too adept at it neither.
I'm gonna move
But-
chat up a little bit so that it can.
There was a stipulation. They felt pretty comfortable after day 2, until their case was tested on day 3.
I'll move this over here.
Now is the time to end this.
Right above
now
my
is the
head.
time to hear the closing arguments. Now is the time to vote your conscience. Thank you.
Yeah, that dude's definitely Malvern. I
Nebraska?
agree with you. There's certain times when it's required.
We were
but
involved in no discussions about a stipulation, and I
really
have no
doesn't
further
want
comment.
witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Position on that.
He's
Would
mad. He's
remind-
getting cooked.
I would remind everybody, as Chief Justice Roberts noted on January 21st,
Yeah, Malvern, you're absolutely right.
2020, citing the trial of Charles Swain, 1905, all parties in this chamber must refrain from using language that is not conducive to civil discourse. I listened to Chief Justice Roberts say that. I agreed with him, and I thought for our colleagues, I would repeat it as I did last night.
Oh man, there's just so much heat.
question we have
Sorry
before
about all
us
the
is
noise.
whether it shall be
It's
in order
adjusting
to
my
consider
microphone.
and debate under the rules of impeachment any motion to subpoena witnesses or documents.
So the impeachment, the charge in the article is about Donald Trump having incited the riot on January
Yeas and nays
6th.
has been
And they're just
made.
arguing
Is there
back and forth
sufficient
about
second?
that.
There appears to be
Jamie
delay.
Raskin and the
clerk
other
will
House
call the roll.
managers, Stacey Plaskett,
Baldwin.
those are the only two names I remember because they've just been
Mr.
absolutely
Barrasso.
slam dunking this man's fucking face for the last like 3 or 4
Mr.
days.
Bennett.
But they have presented
Mrs.
a
Blackburn.
mountain of evidence that would suggest to anyone with
Blumenthal.
more than 2 fucking brain cells that obviously Donald Trump
Blunt.
caused the riot that happened on January 6th.
Booker.
But the reason why that dude is so mad
Bozeman.
is because he's Donald Trump's lawyer and he has to
Mr. Braun.
prove that Donald Trump did not
Brown.
incite the riot. Or rather, he has to discredit all of the evidence that the opposing side presented.
Mrs. Capito.
And you can't because it's literally video
Gardner.
footage, like not even
Parker.
eyewitness testimony. It's just straight up security
Casey.
camera footage and footage of
Gaffney.
things Trump himself has said, screenshots of his tweets, a timeline of all the events that occurred. And the only thing that guy can say is that they didn't do the work
Cornyn.
because he's just been fucking eating Eskimo pie and having a fucking
Cortez
smoke for the
Masto.
last week, I guess.
Mr. Cotton.
Trump
Kramer.
never stopped it. It fizzled out on its own.
Mr. Crapo.
That's the point that the House managers were making, Malvern, is the fact
Good.
that in part of the timeline, like
James.
immediately after Trump's speech
Ms.
finished,
Duckworth.
like Trump's speech at
Mr. Durbin.
wherever he was at, I can't even fucking
Ernst.
remember right now. It's
Ms.
early,
Ernst.
sorry. But
Mrs.
like
Feinstein.
right after Trump finished his speech, they
Mrs.
went along
Fisher.
to the Capitol, and that's when everything
Mrs.
that happened on
Gillibrand.
January 6th happened. And
Graham.
we all know what happened. We've seen
Mr.
more,
Grassley.
even crazier evidence throughout the course of this impeachment trial over the last 3
Mr.
days.
Haggerty.
But even in the immediate aftermath of that,
Hassan.
we all know what happened.
Hawley.
The entire world was watching on January 6th.
Heinrich.
And Trump very obviously knew what was going on. He decided that he would
Serrano.
not check on any of the
Mr. Hoven.
senators. He would not check on his own vice
Mrs.
president.
Heisman.
And as a matter of fact, he was going
Mr.
to make
Inhofe.
disparaging tweets
Mr.
at
Johnson.
his vice president while he was being evacuated because the mob
Mr.
was
Kane.
chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." They literally constructed a gallows
Kelly.
outside of the Capitol building.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. King.
And Trump, in the aftermath,
Klobuchar.
in his address, decided to address
Mr.
the
Langford.
people that did the whole
Mr.
shebang
Leahy.
and tell them that they were special
Lee.
and, you know, they got to go home
Mr. Lujan.
or whatever. So Trump didn't stop anything.
Ms. Lummis.
And the House managers have
Mr.
made the
Manchin.
case that Trump actually, and that's
Markey.
why you'll hear the word incitement come
Mr.
up a lot
Marshall.
because it's actually a legal term. It's
Mr.
a legal
McConnell.
charge that you can get.
Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski.
Trump, well, I mean, so
Murphy.
here's my theory on the on the
Murray.
Biden presidency. So we voted here in the
Ossoff.
states. We voted back in November.
Padilla.
That's when the election night
Mr.
was,
Paul.
and we knew in like December that for sure,
Peters.
for 1000% sure, as in
Mr. Portman.
the election was finished, but Donald Trump had challenged
Reed.
the election, which was well within his legal
Rich.
right to do so, and the House managers have explained as much.
Mr. Romney.
But his challenge got fucking
Rosen.
teabagged out of court 61 times.
Browns.
61 times. He tried to make the
Rubio.
case that there was election fraud and lost that case in federal court
Sanders.
60 fucking 1 times. Or excuse me, in the state courts and in the
Mr.
federal
Sass.
courts. And
Mr. Schatz.
still continued to lie about the fact
Mr.
that he
Schumer.
was under the impression that the election was
Scott of
stolen.
Florida.
And because of how fucking
Scott
batshit
of
nuts
South
Republicans
Carolina.
are in this country, they all
Mr.
believe
Shaheen.
that lie because like half of the Republicans
Mr.
are
Shelby.
QAnon nutters, right? And the other Republican senators want to keep their jobs. They want to stay in power, so they're also going to perpetuate that lie. And that's what I was saying to Donald earlier, is that the reason why a lot of these Republicans will not vote to convict Donald Trump is because if they do that, that'll be an admission of guilt on their part, because Donald Trump incited this action all based on the lie that he actually won the election, and all of those senators perpetuated that same exact lie.
Mr. Van Hollen. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warnock.
I also, just as a little aside, I believe that if Donald Trump had pushed $2,000 checks through before election night, like a couple of weeks even before election night, he probably would have won the election.
Mr. Young.
Especially, and that's what's going to be so shitty about 2022, is that, first of all, even if they vote to convict Trump here, he's still going to be a kingmaker in 2024 in terms of Republican politics. Because like I was saying before, Republicans in this country are brain dead, like absolutely brain dead. So whoever Trump endorses is who they will vote for. Second of all, the Democrats are botching this whole COVID relief thing so fucking hard, right? What did they say during the runoff and all throughout the election? Joe Biden said, John Ossoff said, Raphael Warnock said, if you vote for us, next week, a $2,000 check goes out the door. What happened in the meantime? Fuck all. Absolutely fuck all. We got $600 from the Trump administration, right? And they're talking about giving us a $1,400 check to go with that check, because they want to fucking hoodwink us and convince us that that equals $2,000, when even if you believe that, the requirements to get that $1,400 check are different than the requirements that were set for the $600 check. So there are people that got the $600 check that will not get the $1,400 check because they, by the new terms of the requirements of the new check, they make too much money, so they wouldn't receive it. And that doesn't even count all the people who never got any stimulus checks. There's people who didn't get their $1,200 checks from whatever month it was, like May or whatever last year.
Blumenthal, Booker, Brown, Cantwell, Cardin.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we have a false two-party system in America. So there's extreme conservatives, but they vote Republican. You have very few, like that's the only way you can vote. Just like me as an anarcho-communist. The only interest that I have federally, which is not even really my interest, is the Democratic Party, because we only have two parties that you can possibly vote for, because that's just how fucking goofy this shit is set up in our country. You could vote for third party, but you have to understand when you vote third party that it's a symbolic vote. It's literally just a symbolic gesture. In point of fact, a lot of Trump's supporters lost. The reason why Trump lost a lot of counties is solely because people voted third party. So they lost twice over because Trump didn't get elected, and whatever goofy little fucking libertarian candidate they voted for didn't get elected either. So, if you vote like Green Party or something, the only hope that you have is that enough people vote like 5% of the vote, something like that, to where the Democratic Party will look at that and pick up some of their positions on their platform, which means fuck all at the end of the day either, because there's no legal binding for holding the people accountable to promises they make on the campaign trail.
Rubio, Scott of Florida, Scott of South Carolina, Shelby, Sullivan, Thune, Tillis, Toomey.
If Larry Hogan runs in 2024 and gets the R nomination, I don't think so. I don't think Trump will support him because Trump is petty and they have bad blood, but also because Trump seems pretty waist deep in the abandoned Republican Party rhetoric right now, which is both good and bad because it's going to fracture the party. So, just the
point of inquiry.
Legislation that's in play right now that's being voted on to make the Electoral College irrelevant in terms of the vote, to essentially make the popular vote supersede the Electoral College. Just that is going to teabag the Republicans so fucking hard. But on top of that, you have this movement within the Republican Party right now of QAnoners and fucking Trumpsters who are saying, this party doesn't represent our interests. Not because they were actually working class or becoming class conscious, but because the Republican Party is split in terms of people like Liz Cheney and such who understand that Trump is cancer, not just for their party, but for the illusion of American democracy in general. But so you have people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and like the Bizarro Squad. That's what I'm going to start calling them, yo, the Bizarro Squad. Fucking Andy Harris, Lauren Boebert, fucking Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz.
We always follow.
What's the dude that said he wanted people to stand with him, but he can't even stand because he's in a fucking wheelchair? Madison Cawthorn. Yeah, those people. There's no way that Wheels. Yeah, his new name is Wheels. So like, nah, we're not gonna shame people like that. That's ableist as fuck. But anyway. Yeah, just these absolutely silly people. Fucking what's the one-eyed wonder? The dude that constantly fucking drums up his military service. What the fuck is his name, yo? The fucking goofball that thinks marijuana should still be illegal. I can't remember his name, but he's got an eye patch, and conservatives fucking love him because he fucking lost his eye fucking around trying to get oil for America. Dan Crenshaw. Thank you, Caroline. Dan Crenshaw. Yeah, just these absolutely silly people have splintered the party because you have I would say like traditional Republicans, people who are not invested in politics at all whatsoever. I mean, if you were invested in politics, you probably wouldn't vote Republican, right? But those are people that just vote Republican because their daddy votes Republican or whatever, right? Or they think that the Republicans represent the good old boy, classic, old-fashioned America and traditional values and all that other fucking bullshit and all those platitudes. Those people who know that the QAnon shit is bullshit, who know that Trump is a fucking moron, that Trump actually did not contribute much to the conditions of working class people over the last 3-4 years, but they have to pretend to because they gotta be on their partisan shit. You know what I mean? They gotta support the Republican Party no matter what, because the Democrats are the radical left that want to take everybody's guns and toothbrushes and chop your kids' genitals off at 8 years old, and you know what I mean? All the crazy lunatic shit that they believe about the left. So Abe Lincoln would be so disappointed in where his party ended up. I don't think so, Asian Bruce Willis. I don't think so, because Abe Lincoln was
on the question of whether it shall be in
he was a
order
white supremacist.
to consider and debate under the rules of impeachment any motion to subpoena witnesses or documents. The motion is agreed to by a vote of 55 to 45. Majority Leader.
Mr. President,
Majority
I
Senator
suggest the
Prude's
absence
calling
of
witnesses.
quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
I can't believe that. There's 45 people that really said that they don't want to call witnesses. That's insane to me. And that should tell you what's about to happen when they finally vote on this shit.
Call witnesses. This is live coverage from the Washington Post. We're going to stay glued to the Senate floor here and watch what happens. A surprise this morning that the House impeachment managers asked to call a witness, Congresswoman Herrera Butler, who has gone on the record saying that she was told about a conversation that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy had with President Trump on the day the riot took place. Now, we heard the counter argument.
That's going to be
by
hearsay, though,
President
because
Trump's lawyers, former
if
President
Kevin
Trump's
McCarthy
lawyers
is
at
hella
first saying,
partisan,
"I'm gonna have to subpoena
he's going
100
to say
witnesses,"
lie
but
and
then
say that it
saying
never
he wanted
happened.
to move forward. So that
This
was
is going to
the
be
threat
interesting for
that
sure,
he laid
but
on
I
the
don't know what it's
table
going to
while
amount to.
Also asserting that they'd heard enough, they'd seen enough from the evidence, and they were ready to move forward. But then the attorney saying that he wanted not only to hear from witnesses by Zoom, which is how lead impeachment manager Jamie Raskin said their request could
Mute
be
my
satisfied.
Facebook tab.
But
Sorry
Trump's
for that.
lawyer said that Michael Van Der Veen said he wants to see the witnesses in person in Philadelphia, where he practices law. Let's go to James Homan for the significance here of this. You know, James, there was some confusion there by Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan, who after the vote said, wait, are we voting on a specific witness or like all witnesses? And Senator Leahy wouldn't entertain it because it was breaking from procedure. But you know, there was a little bit of confusion there as to what exactly they were opening the door for, James.
Yeah, and what they were doing is opening the door to debate calling witnesses. And notably, so at the end there, 5 Republicans ended up joining every single Democrat to vote to call witnesses or to vote to open debate.
It's all good, Malvern. You didn't really miss much. I was just on my soapbox for a minute.
Each witness. This isn't, you know, what the vote that just happened did isn't to allow Michael Van Der Veen to harass 100 people.
Yeah, just
Philadelphia, as he called it.
That might sound wild to certain people when I say that Abraham Lincoln was a white supremacist.
People you'd expect,
but
Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Ben Sasse,
Abraham Lincoln was a
and then
supporter.
Lindsey
So the
Graham,
conventional wisdom
the
is that.
Trump loyalist who's been
Let me
advising the
turn
defense,
this
who
dude down
recommended
just a little
the
bit,
first round
just in
of
case you guys can't really hear what I'm saying. So the conventional wisdom is that. In the Civil War, there were 2 conflicting parties, the party of abolitionism and the Confederate South, the party of the pro-slavery party. And there's actually 3 parties, right? There was the party of abolitionism, which was people like John Brown, you know what I mean? And obviously all of the glorious abolitionists, like black abolitionists you've heard of, like you know,
closing arguments.
Fucking
you know, you had someone like Mitch McConnell,
people who participated in the Underground Railroad and such. I'm having a really hard time remembering a bunch of names off the top of my head right now, if that's not obvious. It's really early. I just ate. Sorry.
Right away.
But anyway, so there was your first party that we know and love, the abolitionists, John Brown and such. Underground Railroad, all of that. And then you had the pro-slavery South, obviously, with the Confederacy. But the third party that doesn't really get mentioned or that gets hand-waved away or glossed over is that there is a party called the American Colonization Society. And their stance on the whole situation could essentially be summed up as what the alt-right say today in their white nationalism, that all the jobs that are done by undocumented immigrants should be done by white people, white working class people. The American Colonization Society believed that all of the work that is done by African slaves should be done by white people, on top of the anti-indigenous shit that all the white men of the time believed about the indigenous peoples. So that genocide was already well underway. But their beliefs about African people was that they should just basically get packed on a boat and sent the fuck back to Africa. And that's what they did. There was the only American colony was in Africa, a country called Liberia, capital city Monrovia. And that served as the destination for all the Africans that they wanted to get rid of here in America, to the point where they would tell slaves, like, hey, we'll grant you your freedom, you know what I mean? We will end your servitude to whatever white master that you've been born into slavery working for, or perhaps been purchased by. But the stipulation to that is that you have to get on this boat and go back to Liberia, because we don't want you here in America. America's a white man's country. And that's what people like Abraham Lincoln believed, because his motivation for the abolition of slavery was not out of any type of altruistic sentiment for African peoples in his country. It was because he just wanted to get rid of us all, and he realized that you can't do that while your economy depends on our labor. But at the same time, you can't just fucking murder us all. So you have to figure out a way to incentivize us to leave. And you'll hear alt-right people make the same exact argument these days. People like Nick Fuentes talking about how you can have a peaceful transition to a white ethno-state It's all the same silliness that they were saying like 300 years ago. 300, like not 300, but you get what I'm saying.
This vote is to subpoena witnesses. So this is not an invite. This will be a congressional subpoena that will
And Liberia had its own problems because they fucking set up slavery in Liberia. And that's why I rail so hard against black capitalism, why I am a communist in terms of my political ideology or my economic ideology, is because you cannot have capitalism without an underclass. Capitalism relies on cheap labor and infinite growth. So wherever you have capitalism, you will have some form of what could be recognized as slavery or slavery with extra steps. And that's why in the 13th Amendment, you can actually, if you actually read the 13th Amendment, it actually did not get rid of slavery in terms of its abolition. It just made slavery punishment for federal crimes. And that's how you ended up with things like the black codes, to where, okay, we cannot make de facto racial-based slavery anymore, right? This is unconstitutional. So what we'll do instead is we will make slavery criminal-based, and then we will criminalize black life. So, and it's still to this day played up in the fact that blacks will receive longer and more harsh jail sentences than whites for the same exact crimes. I feel like I don't have to go too deep into talking about things like segregation and Jim Crow and all of that stuff. There are people still alive who went through that. My grandmother ran off with her father, her mother and father, and a couple of her siblings. They ran off of the plantation that they were on because her father was a sharecropper, and they were forced to pick cotton from sunup to sundown for pennies on the dollar a day. My grandmother's told me stories about how she would intentionally drink tobacco spit, like dip spit, like other people's tobacco spit, or intentionally eat tobacco leaves or something, so that when the property owner came to force them to work in the fields that morning, he would see that they were sick, they were throwing up, they were sick, so they wouldn't have to work, because that was the only way you got out of working in the heat all day, sun up to sundown, was if you were too sick, you were deemed too sick to work, right? And that same plantation was the plantation where her mother, her mother's father, and her mother's father were all born into slavery. Born, worked, lived, and died on that plantation. Well, except for her mother, because they ran off the plantation. But my grandmother's grandfather and great-grandfather both were born into slavery, worked, and lived, and died on that same exact plantation that she ran away from as a little girl. So I get very, very fucking passionate when I talk about abolition and when I talk about anti-capitalism and these ideas, because people get it twisted and they think that slavery was like this abstract thing that happened only in the South and we got rid of it, and black people asked really, really nicely for our rights, and the government just decided out of the kindness of its heart to give them to us, when in actuality slavery in America lasted well into the 60s in the South. There were people, just like how we have Juneteenth, because while the 13th Amendment was ratified, it took them quite some time to actually go to these individual plantations and make these people stop enslaving the Africans that were on their property. And even when that happened, they transitioned to the sharecropper setup, to where you have these people working on your property and they're indebted to you because you are fronting the capital for them to work and make a living, right? For them to survive. So they owe you money, they owe you rent money for the land that they work and make money off of and farm and et cetera, et cetera. And if they don't make enough money to pay you off, they have to continue to work, right? So it becomes an endless cycle. And obviously, you can end up in debtor's prison if you don't pay your landlord, right? So that's just a continuation. Then you'll be really enslaved because you'll be in jail, right?
or may not have said yes. So it is possible that
and Mississippi, where this all happened, is the birthplace of the concept of the prison plantation.
Pulled this surprise move if he thought that she was going to resist compliance.
Yeah, I get really passionate about that because I am a direct descendant of slaves on both sides of my family.
That Trump was totally callous.
And it pains me when we participate in the worst form of identity politics, where we're excusing certain behaviors or we are legitimizing certain concepts that objectively harm black people as a whole, in a sense that the floor of the material conditions for black people is still straight up slavery, abject poverty, where you're living in a hovel with mold, no indoor plumbing, no running water, no electricity. You have no access immediately to nutritional food. You live in a food desert. You might live in an actual straight up man-made desert to where in the summertime your neighborhood is 115 fucking degrees because there's no trees anywhere. It's all concrete and steel, right? When we think about the worst possible conditions for black people in America, that should always be what is considered when we talk about our position in this country. But because we have some black millionaires, right? Because LeBron James can get up and dribble a ball around and make millions of dollars. Lil Wayne can get in front of a microphone and rhyme nigga with nigga and make millions of dollars. Because Kamala Harris can make a career out of keeping nonviolent offenders in prison for extended prison sentences because that contributes to California's economy in the long run. And then she becomes vice president of an imperialist, capitalist, colonial system. We legitimize all of that because they have black faces. And the same thing with Obama.
And that's when you then saw Michael.
And it's that's why I support Black Lives Matter. I am anti-statist at the core of my beliefs. I'm a pragmatist, so I understand we need a state to have socialism to get to communism, just like we need capitalism to get from feudalism to socialism. So I understand the place that a lot of these concepts have in terms of creating this quote-unquote utopian society, when really it's not utopian. It's just wanting to not have black people be in the conditions that we are in a lot of the places in America.
Part of it is strategy. Part of it is that this actually really, having Herrera Butler say this under oath does very much strengthen their...
Sorry, I talked a lot. I didn't really read chat.
...derelict in his duty.
Rhonda Colvin, here's what we're hearing from
I'm going to turn the volume on this back up too, so you can see what they're saying.
Demergen is passing on that there was just a lot of confusion in there, especially in that early aftermath, and we saw that ourselves. We heard Senator Dan Sullivan ask,
Malvern. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a mostly white neighborhood, and I grew up around a lot of racists who changed, or rather, people who were raised by racists, and they changed their worldviews, and sometimes not. Their parents would change their worldviews just based on their proximity to me and me sharing my experiences and that by virtue of just having me as a part of their lives as a friend or whatever. And granted, a lot of those considered me just a token friend to excuse their racism by being able to say things like,
my question for you is,
you're not like other black people, or how can I be racist? I have a black friend, me being that black friend.
Do we anticipate
saying
Republicans
I sound
being on the
white
same page and
or
Democrats
whatever
getting their own
racist shit
strategy
that they
together
believe
here?
and refuse to challenge in their mind.
Right, it seems
that
like
always
some of these
was
decisions were
there,
kind of late
but
breaking,
there was
and I think I
definitely
referenced
people in
to
my
that,
life
earlier
that I could tell
in the
that
morning
they
show that a lot of talking might have happened after they
a lot of their
left
opinions about the
yesterday,
world were
this
different
morning. So it
just
seems
by
like
how I
both
lived and
Republicans
how
and
I make
Democrats
other
are
people
trying to
know
figure out
that
the
black
way
people live in
forward
this
here
country.
and what to do next. And that's pretty important because utilizing witnesses could mean everything, honestly.
You don't know why you didn't learn about any of that, Asian Bruce
You
Willis?
see
I mean,
there
people
that
aren't taught
Andrew
about it.
Lee
You
does
have
look a bit
to,
concerned now that
and
he's
I
really
don't
doubling
fault
down on
anyone
that
for not
argument
knowing
that
a lot of
the
this shit,
charges
because
on
you have to
incitement
go,
is not about what he
there
was
is such
doing
a
during the time of the
deep
riot.
and
It seems like everybody's trying to figure out what is next, what would be the next way
insidious
forward. But I think any witnesses that would have
movement
any
to
effect would be
obscure all
witnesses
this
that could
information
speak
from
to
the
this
average
point in the
person, so that you
timeline
never
about
question
Trump
any of
and his
the status
mindset
quo in
during the
America. You know what I
insurrection,
mean?
because
You won't
yesterday we
question
heard
any of
Trump's
these
team
things.
talk about he's the most law and order president. But if he wasn't calling in the guard or being a part of those conversations, or he wasn't concerned about Mike Pence, then the impeachment process
Malvern, you don't have to
needs that
dox
show their
yourself,
whole
but I'm
point
just
that
out of
he,
curiosity, what part of
said
the
he's not
UK are
supporting
you
the
in?
rioters,
Because
yet he
I
didn't
know
do
that
anything to stop
it's not
them.
quite
So
like
how can we have it
America.
both
I know,
ways? So,
but there's
again, I
is
think
issues
they
with
are, now
racism
that
in the
they are at
UK,
this
but
part where they could foreseeably have
the
some
UK is just so
witnesses, they're really
different in
figuring out
terms of
who
how
would be the
their
most compelling
poverty.
voices at
Northeast
this
Scotland,
point,
okay, cool.
because we are
So I
seeing
got
more
some
appetite
Scots in
now
in my
from
chat
this
because
group
the dude lifer
of
yesterday was from
senators who
Scotland.
want to hear a little
I
bit
actually,
more. And it also
the
shows
people
you
that owned my
Q&A
family were
that they
from
went through
Scotland.
yesterday
My father's
didn't seem to
mother's
have
side
as much of an
were the
effect.
Urquharts. I told
They
the story
didn't
yesterday,
utilize
but
all of their time with the Q&A.
they spell
Yesterday
it
went through rather
ERKARD
quickly. We noted
because,
yesterday
you
as
know,
well that the defense
black
team
illiteracy and
also
stuff
didn't even use a quarter of their
after
time.
slavery and
They,
whatnot. Thank you for the like,
came to
Christian.
about 2.5 hours
But
of
the way that it's
arguments,
actually
whereas the
spelled was
impeachment managers,
URQHART, I
broke
believe.
theirs
It was the
between 2 days.
Urquharts
So it shows
from
that
Scotland
enough
that
hasn't quite happened yet
they
to
owned our
put
people.
minds at ease in that group of senators who want
But
more
that's
answers.
where
Let's bring Aaron Blake into the conversation.
those people in my
Senior
family
reporter
got their
for
name
The Fix.
from.
Aaron, you don't have a crystal ball, but you're a good journalist, and so you've already written about
Yeah, a story on a dude that had a life
that
sentence
could
for selling 2 nickel bags.
potentially
They
give
used some
important
backhanded
testimony
law.
at
Yeah.
this trial. You know, talk about who
It's
is
cool
really
that he
relevant
beat his
to
case, but
this
yeah, 20 years,
trial.
that's nothing. That's
Right,
those
so I
people are good
initially
for
wrote
that.
about
That's
some of these
they will
potential
lock you up.
witnesses,
That's where
early
laws like
this
the
week
3 strikes
before
law
the
and that
trial
sort of things come
started.
from. It's
Seems like a
just
long
so
time
that they
ago
have
now.
excuses to lock
When it
us
looked
up
like
and keep us
Democrats,
locked
and
up,
it's been looking like that
so
for a
that
while
we
until
become the raw
just about an
materials
hour
that they
ago
really
here,
see us as.
that they wouldn't
They could
call
take
any
away our
witnesses
rights
in
to
the first
vote. They
place.
could
That
take
seemed
away
to
our
be
rights
a
to
questionable decision
arm
given that
ourselves, the
in
Second Amendment
impeachment
rights.
in the House.
Thanks for the
The
share,
idea
Mike
that we
Howard.
also wouldn't see any in the actual Senate trial. Doesn't
Muchas
really
gracias,
speak
mi
to the
amigo.
idea that the Democrats put forward, which is that this is just
You
so
have a good day too,
significant
Christian.
that we really need
I
to find
appreciate
out
you.
the truth here and have accountability. Some of the ones that I mentioned
Muchas gracias
before
para
were
interesado.
the Capitol rioters who have cited the president's invitation either when they were in the building on some of those live streams or in their court cases. Several of them in their defenses have said that they felt that they were invited by the president. That might be legally expedient for them to try and shift blame towards the president rather than themselves. Some other ones were some of these White House aides or former White House aides, former Trump campaign aides who were involved in planning of the January 6th rally.
Yeah, that's cool,
shifts for this
Malvern.
rally
Yeah,
changed over time.
yeah, that's cool,
The idea of a march toward the Capitol came on kind of late. Figuring out how all these things came together and just what the planning involved and how this might have
Congressman
been
Higgins,
foreseeable
yeah, that's
would
gross,
seem to
Asian
be
Bruce Willis.
an
That's
important
fucking
thing. And
gross.
then in the last few days, the names that have surfaced and are now
Your mom's listening and wants to know what my
are
educational
the ones
background
that,
is. So
we've heard
I am
the most
actually a
about,
college
with
dropout.
these phone calls that President
I
Trump
went
had with
to
lawmakers early
high
in the
school. I went to
attempted
private
insurrection.
school because I
Katie
was
Herrera-Butler,
the quote unquote
Butler,
gifted
who is
kid.
now
You know, I'm a
basically
millennial.
stepping forward,
So
putting out a press
I
release
was.
saying that people should be honest
There's
about
a
what
saying.
happened
What's
for-
up, Murdy
for colleagues should
009?
talk
What up,
about
Murdy
these things.
009? Yeah, I'm in
She could
news
speak to
mode
this
right now.
idea that the
So
president
I was
was
saying
at the very least indifferent to what was taking
there's a
place in the
saying
Capitol.
that
And
goes,
then the other
if
one
you're
is
not an
Senator Tom
anarchist by
Tuberville. This is
18,
the
you
other
have no
call that we
heart.
know
And if
about
you're
that
not
the
a
president
communist
had
by
early
30, you
on
have no brain.
when he called Mike Lee accidentally.
And that's kind of
seeking
where
to
I'm
talk
at.
to Tommy
I was a
Tuberville,
quote
and
unquote
we know
gifted
that
child
he
in
and
elementary
Tuberville
school, middle
talked
school, high
about
school,
the,
but
overturning the election
my
before
interest
Tuberville
was
ended the
not
call by telling
in
the
the
president
bullshit that they were
that,
trying to feed us.
Vice
So
President
I
Pence had
never
been
got
evacuated.
particularly good
This also
grades.
speaks to the
I was
idea
just
of the
one of those
president
people that
being
was
focused on
considered
overturning the
brilliant but
election,
lazy,
even as these
because
lawmakers
I was
were in
more
significant
interested in
danger.
developing
It
my
also
skills
speaks
as an
to the
artist
idea that
and playing
potentially the
music
president
and
might
so
have
on and so
known
forth.
about the situation with Mike Pence around the time of his speech.
My
those Senator Lee
background
House
in
and
as
Paul
far
actually
as
came
my
after
higher
the
education,
attacking
like
Vice
my
President
college
Pence. So these are
education
some of the
is
significant
in
witnesses.
forensic
We're not going to see
science,
all of them, I would
mortuary
guess, because
science. My
Democrats
mother
will
and my
keep this
stepfather, rest in
somewhat
peace. My
expedient.
mother's still alive.
But
My stepfather
certainly
passed a few
those are
years
the ones that
ago,
would
but
seem to answer some of the
they're
big questions
morticians
that
and
still
funeral
remain in this
directors.
trial.
And that's
I'll
where a
keep this
lot of
question
my
here, and we've
working
been
class
talking about it
experience
with
comes
James
from,
Aranda
aside from
already.
retail,
Why
because
subpoena
of my
Congresswoman
first
Hilaria
job
Butler
and my
not
continued
the person
work
who
after
actually
that.
had the
But
phone call she said she was told about, Kevin McCarthy?
yeah, Mike Howard, yeah,
What,
Team College Dropout.
Congresswoman
Cue the
Butler provides
Kanye
is
West.
somebody who seems to be actually motivated to talk. Subpoenaing.
But
a
yeah, I used to
lower-ranking
draw. I
House
wasn't
member is not
particularly
as
gifted
severe
at
a step
drawing. I used to
as
draw
subpoenaing the
manga. I
House
was really
Minority
into
Leader.
Japanese
That would certainly
animation,
ratchet
like
things
anime
up
and
and would
manga. So that's
probably
where
lend
my
credence to
art
the
style
Trump
is
team's threats to
heavily
call people
influenced
like
by.
Nancy
But then
Pelosi, even
I
Vice
got really
President
into like
Harris, who
Photoshop
Michael
and
Vander
excuse
talked
me,
about just a short
digital
while
image
ago.
and type
I
manipulation,
also
which is
think that
where my
Butler,
college
sorry, I can't say her
education
name
came
correctly.
from, where I ended
She
up before
provides
I ended
maybe
up
a little bit
dropping
more
out.
of an
But
entree into
I
who
went through a
else could
lot.
speak to this.
When I
She
first
has
got into
referenced the
college, my
idea
major was
that
forensic
other, quote,
science.
patriots
Then I switched
in the House should
to
be willing to
music.
speak up. Well, maybe
Then I
she'll
switched
provide
to
some
mortuary
some
science
pointers
because
about
I
where
was under the
this should go
impression that I was
next.
going to
Are
start a
there other
funeral home with my
lawmakers
parents
who could attest
until
to the
they went off and did
details
their own
of
thing.
that phone call
And
with
then I ended
Kevin
up
McCarthy?
in
And so I view this
college
more
for
as
graphic
them
design. I went to
picking out
ITT
the
Tech.
most logical first
And
step in witnesses.
you
It doesn't
know,
mean that
I
they'll
took
call a whole
classes
bunch of
in
witnesses after
typography
that.
and digital
Certainly the fact
image
that
and
she
type
has
manipulation and
motivation
such.
has
But that
come
was more
forward
so
in
just
a way to
like
talk about
me
these
trying
things,
to
suggests
attain
that
my
this would be
piece
a
of
witness
paper
that
because
would
I've been
at
working
least
with
provide them a
Photoshop since
little
high
bit of an
school, since
initial,
middle school, really.
entry into what they're
Once
trying
I
to get.
discovered that you could create art without putting too much effort in, because I obviously,
just wanted to
clearly,
get a sense from
I
you
am fucking
about
addled.
how
My brain is
far-reaching
absolutely
this
addled
could
and hindered with
go. As you
ADHD.
point out, the impeachment managers
I have
just
been
focusing on one
diagnosed with
congresswoman
ADHD
does
since
try to
like
limit,
fifth grade. But
the way that this
once I
could
figured out that to
easily
make
sort of
beautiful
grow
art,
and
like visual
expand and
art,
multiply.
you
But
didn't
we
have
did
to
just
sit
hear
for
Mr.
hours,
Vanderveen,
days,
President Trump's
weeks
lawyer, say he'd like to
with
subpoena
a
100
pen
people.
and
Yeah, this has been
watercolors
the
and
threat,
oil
the
paints
idea
and
that if
such,
Democrats
creating a
start calling
thing. You could just take a
witnesses, that the
photograph
Trump team will
and,
just
you
call a
know,
whole
in a
bunch
couple of
witnesses or
hours,
attempt to
make
call a
something
whole
that looks
bunch of
awesome.
witnesses.
That was my wheelhouse at that point.
It's a threat because
The
it
only
might
thing I
put
really
somebody
drew
like
in
the
terms of
speaker in a tough
illustration
spot
after
if she
that
were
was
to
like
actually
death
have to
metal logos
testify.
and logos
The
for
Trump
bands
team
and
could
such.
use
But
these witnesses like Muriel Bowser to kind of shift the attention toward what was done before this happened. how
Murdy,
much
you can't
preparation
have
there had
freedom
been,
without
to
justice.
really
That's the
shift
thing.
the focus on
Yeah,
other issues.
so
But I
you're into
really think
mythology
that,
now, Malvern?
Democrats were in
That's
many ways
awesome.
kind of
Mythology is
forced into
cool.
this position.
Mythology
There
is
was a lot
definitely a great interest of mine
calls,
because,
for witnesses that didn't exist
you know,
before, in light of what
it was
we heard
always
about the
interesting to
McCarthy
me, like
call,
Greek
in light of some of these
mythology,
other
Roman mythology,
revelations. So the idea that they would
obviously
go through this process
ancient
and not
Egyptian
ask to give
mythology,
more information, I think
especially knowing
risk
that,
looking pretty bad.
you know,
Beyond that, though, I don't believe they want
the
to draw
Kemetic
this out a
people
lot.
were,
The Trump team, I think,
you know,
understands
were black.
that, and that's why they're threatening to call all these witnesses because they know Democrats.
I got really
don't want
into
this
like
hanging over
West
the
African
entirety
Vodun
of
and all that type
President
of
Biden's
stuff
first
because
100 days. And
that
so that
while
threat
I was
really
raised
geared
Baptist
as
and I
much
would
toward,
consider myself more or
you
less
know, having
a
witnesses that
atheist
maybe Democrats
nowadays,
don't want to see,
that
but also
spiritual
drawing
aspect
things out in a way
of
that
my
Democrats have made
being
pretty clear
was
they
definitely
don't want this
still
process
very
to be.
very strong. So
Okay, and of course,
I have a
members of
great
the Senate
interest
have
in
control
terms
over just how
of
strong or far-reaching this
deities
could
and other
get.
people's cultures
Rhonda
that are
Colvin, they have
based
to,
around
you know,
whatever
take
mythologies that they
votes on
have.
subpoenaing specific witnesses, and they have simple majority abilities there.
Thank
So
you,
only a
Asian
couple
Bruce
of
Wells. Good luck with your
Republicans say,
shoots,
yeah,
man.
You know, I would like to hear from her. They can subpoena her, and if they do that,
Yeah, if I'm still on, I might, depending on how long this takes, I might play something. I might play some games because it
this is
seems
gonna
like
slow
they're
things
taking a
down
while
a
to get their
lot.
witnesses and such
And
together
at the
right
time
now. I
that-
don't know how long they're going to take to
Whichever one
do
of our
this.
team was talking about that, I was doing the mental calculations in my head about just how long this could go and how far.
But yeah,
reaching it is.
Murdy,
And of course, it's important
I
to let
don't
the
believe
process
that you
play
can
out, right?
have
We're not-
freedom without
we're
justice.
We're not trying to sort of shove
I believe.
things along.
Well,
But
really, those two
we're now
things
in a
are,
holiday
are
weekend,
intertwined.
right?
You
So
can't really
here's
have
Saturday,
justice without
tomorrow's
freedom. You
Sunday,
can't really have
and
freedom
Monday is
without
President's
justice.
Day. The Senate
That's
have
why
plans to be
consider myself.
out next week, and frankly, we
My
don't necessarily
political
anticipate being here
ideology
either tomorrow.
is
So what are we now
first and
thinking about
foremost
the
based on
timeline of what could
abolition.
happen?
This is why I don't trust nihilists.
Yeah, I don't know if I didn't
because
anticipate that we would be here. I just never know here on the Hill.
in my opinion, in my understanding, you cannot, you can't be for abolition if you don't value human life or you believe that human life has no intrinsic value. You know what I mean?
When we came in this morning, it was really just myself and our videographer.
Humans
Justin,
make their
and
own
there weren't
value
many
out of their
reporters.
own
It looked like
lives,
everybody was
and
taking
I
the day
believe
off.
that we should live in a
And
world
there was this
where
speculation that
you
this
don't
would be all
need to
wrapped
be
up today.
productive
But
for
what this
someone
also points
else
out, too,
in
this is
order to
also
have a
tells
decent
broader
living.
story about the power structure in the Senate, right? Because you have these core senators who are in that moderate column, Romney, Murkowski.
We can talk about whatever
they're
here,
really
Malvern.
driving decisions here. They really have some power in this proceeding.
Yeah,
as
just
well
don't
as
advocate for
when,
violence.
the
That's the
Senate
only
picks
thing
up
we
votes,
can't do
they're
here
ones
is
that have to
advocate
be,
for violence, because that will get me
lobbied
banned, and then we
whipped
won't be
to
able
go
to
on
talk
one
about
side or the
anything
other
at
when
all.
there are so
Right?
many
That's not good.
close votes. And I think we're seeing evidence of their power, that at any moment, if enough of those in the middle want to join a decision of
Thank
the
you, Donald. I
majority
appreciate
or
you.
the minority, that they can really change things and shift things. So I think this is also evidence, too, of what the power structure in the Senate looks like right now.
All right, Aaron Blake, let's get you in here one more time before we let you go. So, you know, it looks like things are on
Thanks
pause in the
everyone
Senate
for
right
being
now,
here.
but what we can expect to be happening is they are figuring out who wants to hear from which potential witnesses, right?
Yeah,
Because
Justin, you
everyone needs
missed
to know
that.
who's really
Yeah,
driving
they
this train.
voted. That's what the vote
Perhaps
was
those
for
moderate
earlier.
senators that Ron was just talking
Was that they
about,
voted
and
to
who
allow
specifically
witnesses.
they're going to want to hear from.
So
probably
both
a
sides
lot of
are, I
strategizing,
guess,
figuring things out,
gathering their
hammering things out,
witnesses right
happening behind
now.
the scenes right now.
Which and
Yeah,
Jamie
and,
Raskin pointed this
a lot
out.
of it is going to be
Really,
about how this
the
is going to
defense
take place.
only needs one
Michael
witness,
Vanderveen, the Trump
but he's too
lawyer,
busy playing golf in
expressed
Florida right
concerns
now.
about
So
the proposal from Jamie Raskin to have this deposition take place over a Zoom call. I think Vanderveen at one point said that
Greek,
he
that's
needed
funny,
to do these
Malvern. I'm
depositions,
playing the
and he
game
needed to do them in
Hades
his
right
office
now,
in
and I really
Philadelphia.
like their
He said
adherence to
Philadelphia.
a lot of the tropes that are
So
found
again,
in Greek
returning
mythology.
to the idea that
I
this is going
studied
to be
Latin,
much more drawn out if Democrats
my
demand
freshman
on
and
going
sophomore
down
years
this
of high
path
school. So
and having
just
more
by way
detailed,
of
less
that, I got a
cursory,
little bit of Roman
interviews
mythology
and less quick
and a little
interviews
bit of Greek
than
mythology.
Democrats seem to want. That's going to be something that they need to figure out. But of course, we have a situation in which Democrats have control over much of this process.
Yeah,
they also have to
Murdy's.
balance
China
that
is a
against
little bit
looking
weird
like they
because
are
while
railroading the president or being
I critically
unfair in
support
how many
China,
witnesses
right?
they're
Because
allowing
China
and things like
has
that.
done the
It's all a
most
very
out of
delicate
any
process
society,
that
any
they now have
country
entered into in a
to
rather,
uplift people out of poverty,
quick
right?
fashion, a
They
rather,
uplifted their
surprising fashion to some
population in a
people.
lot of cases from
And
a
now it's
straight up
really about figuring out
agrarian
all the
population,
details, which I think is really
people that
what
literally
today is
just
going to
lived
be
in
about,
huts
which
and
is far
shacks
different from what we all
and
expected it
farmed,
to be
and
about.
that was
All right, Aaron
the
Blake, thank you so
entirety
much.
of
James
their
Hohmann,
life.
let's go to what Marco
And the
Rubio
life
is
expectancy
tweeting
was like
right
30 or
now.
40 years old.
He says this: now
To
that we are going to
go
have
to
witnesses, no one can
a
claim this is a fair trial unless both
superpower,
sides
a
are
modern
now allowed to
superpower, in
call
the
them.
amount of time that they did
And that's the
is
huge
remarkable,
thing.
to say the least.
That's
The same
you
thing with
see
the
these
USSR, with how
conferring senators,
quickly they
it's pretty
industrialized
noteworthy. You always
their,
can tell kind of who's talking to who.
in a lot of cases,
And that's,
agrarian
Mitch McConnell
populations.
talking to a lawyer
But
there and
that
a
said,
group of other
there
senators.
are
And
lots
what they're
of
trying to do is
issues
kind of come
with
up with a
their
deal,
setup.
some kind of
My main issue with
agreement.
them, with China,
You know, it was
is
obviously a
the way that they
55 to
treat
45
Africa.
vote. So
Because
you need,
I'm also
a kind of a separate
anti-colonialist
organizing
in
resolution
my beliefs.
in terms of calling witnesses. So
And,
what's probably
you know,
happening right now and why this
I wouldn't have
delay,
too much of a
could go on
problem
for a while, this is
with
kind of a natural
China
thing that happens in
providing
trial,
raw
is
materials
basically the
and
prosecution
even
and the
helping
defense are
to build
negotiating
infrastructure
some
in
kind
some of
trade
these
in all likelihood,
African
you know, or
areas,
maybe,
some of these African
in exchange
territories.
for the one witness they
But
get some other
the way
witness,
that they treat
or,
the
you
areas
know,
that they
you could
go
have
to when
each
they
side call 3 witnesses,
do these things strikes me
and
as
process
pretty heavily
sort of
colonial.
does matter
Even
in
if
the
that's
Senate,
not
but it
their
also is
stated
significant
intention
for
to have
optics.
Chinese colonies in
Obviously,
Africa,
Jamie Raskin just
it would
wants the one
seem to
witness,
me
and then they can
like
move forward and
they are
kind of
interested
deal
in
with,
spreading their
this
culture.
particular
And I don't even
issue.
just mean
the Republicans have every
like
incentive if this is
communism
gonna
or
get
communalism
delayed, and if their
or
presidents say
socialism
week
to these
is
other
going to be
countries.
messed
Like I
up
straight
to
up
make
mean
this as
they want
uncomfortable for
to
Democrats as possible, but
export
also to
Chinese
gum up,
culture to
President
these
Biden's
African
agenda,
countries that they are helping
kind
to
of portray
industrialize,
this as somehow
which I kind of have a
slowing down
problem
COVID
with
relief or whatever.
because
even though, as
look
you noted,
no
it seems
further than
already supposed to be
America to
off
see the
next week.
consequences of what
So
I would amount to
those
cultural
conversations
genocide.
are happening right now. They're trying to figure out not just the legal strategy here, but also the political sort of messaging strategy of how do you talk about this.
Yeah, religion
It's not
talk
just
is
Marco
fine
Rubio,
here.
you're seeing Lindsey
I don't
Graham
consider
also
myself
tweet,
terribly
if
religious.
they're gonna
and
drag this out, we're gonna drag it out.
I think
a really
religion is
long
one of those
time,
things
grind
where the
everything to a halt,
atheists, the
and essentially doing what you saw Michael
r/atheists,
Vander
the
Bean,
fucking
Trump lawyer,
fedora
do,
tipping
which is
atheists,
to threaten
like to throw
call 100
the
witnesses,
baby out with the bathwater.
Okay, but the question about
I
that
have
is
my
bottom
own
line.
personal
You need
trauma
a simple majority
with
to call a specific witness.
my
right?
experience as religion,
So,
but at the same time, I
you know,
understand, especially in the
partisan
black community,
picks.
the importance that
I mean,
church, not
yesterday
the
we
church,
heard a question
but church
by Marco
itself has
Rubio
played
put forth to the
in
attorneys
uplifting
that
and
didn't
being
say the
a
name
support
Hillary
system for
Clinton,
black people
but
in America.
was all about Hillary
And
Clinton.
my
Like,
favorite
I'm gonna
music all
paraphrase
comes
here,
from
but
black church.
Couldn't in
So
the future this sort of snowball of partisanship continue, and we could at some point subpoena a Secretary of State and have her, a former Secretary of State, and have her come before?
yeah, Murdy. Yeah, I understand
Congress.
that completely.
Hillary
I'm
Clinton was the name that he
anti-authoritarian
was
for
not
sure.
saying.
I'm
So if
clearly,
we
obviously
see partisan
anti-racist.
engagement and the Republicans
But
try
yeah,
to call, you know, someone who's
I've
like
heard
completely off the radar
stories
here, like a Hillary
of.
Clinton, and the Democrats try to call someone.
I mean,
like, let's say they
obviously,
wanna hear
the
from
way
Donald
that
Trump, but
Chinese people treat
Republicans feel like
Africans
that
when
is
they're
just
in
like a non-starter
Africa.
and not
But
gonna
I've also
happen.
heard stories about how
You know,
xenophobic the Chinese people can
where does
be
that go?
when
Yeah, so
talking
that- so
about
it
African
ends up-
workers who come to their
Technically,
country.
there's some procedural
I've heard it
complications, but
compared
you're absolutely
to
right.
how
The bottom line is that,
Americans
like,
treat
if Republicans wanna call
undocumented
Kamala
immigrants
Harris
and Mexican
and
workers
ask her
here in
about
America,
when she urged people on
which
Twitter
is
to donate
the
to
just the level of
a
disdain
defense fund
and
for people who were getting arrested as part of the
just the
protests
idea of
over the
superiority
summer
of their
after
culture
George Floyd
compared
was
to
killed,
others,
which is something
which
that the
is
Republican, the
it's
defense lawyers
supremacy.
for the former president
So
mentioned
I
like
can't
8 times
condone
yesterday.
or
That's just
support
not
that.
germane
But
at all to the trial.
that
and
said, like I said,
no
I critically
Democrat is
support
gonna
them
vote to call Kamala
because
Harris.
no
And
other
in fact,
country in the world
you know,
has
so you could have 50,
uplifted as much of their
it's a tiebreaking vote,
population
so there's some
from
weird scenario where
those
Kamala
levels of
Harris would have to
poverty
come
as
break
quickly
the
as they have.
tie, if it was a 50-50 split. But the truth is that people like Mitt Romney are serious-minded about
I'm on the
this,
fence about black
and-
church
and
only
Romney's not
because
gonna
I would
play
I
along
would
with
like
some,
black church
you
a
know,
lot
the kind of
more
procedural
if
games
I
that some,
knew
you know,
that
someone
they
like Ted
preached
Cruz or Josh
more
Hawley would wanna
of
play.
the values
So
of our civil
ultimately
rights
this,
forefathers,
could end
right?
up getting
Things that
bogged
Fred
down,
Hampton and
there is some kind of legal
Martin Luther King
obligation of
Jr.
fairness where if
and
there are people
all of these civil rights leaders preached about.
the Trump team wants
But
to call that
it
could
would
be
seem
exculpatory,
that the
it would be
idea of
hard
capitalism
to say
has
no to them
pretty
for some of
effectively
the Democrats.
infected
But the
the
truth
black
is that
church. And
they've had the
you
opportunity
see it
to do
in
that. The Trump
churches
defense
where
lawyers could have had
people
Dan
are pulling
Scavino, the
up
president's
to
former
church
caddy,
and
turned
beat up
social media guru,
Camrys
turned
and
White
stuff
House
like
chief of
that
staff, who was with
to
Trump in
pay
the room when all this
tithes
was playing out.
to a
You
pastor
could have
who's
Dan
coming to
Scavino,
church in a Lexus with gold
you know,
watches
if
on. It's
if they had a good story,
it's very
to tell,
disgusting to
Trump's
me.
lawyers
It's a
would have said, "We want
perversion
Dan
of
Scavino
everything
to
that
come
stands
talk about how
for to me.
horrified
And
Donald
that's not
Trump
every
was
church.
that day.
That's
But
definitely not every
he
church,
wasn't.
but it's
So
enough
they're
churches to
not
make me raise an eyebrow
eager to have
whenever
Scavino
I,
testify. Now, the question that we've talked about a little bit in the last couple of minutes is,
deal with
what if
black
Democrats
churches.
say, we want Dan Scavino to testify, who was with Trump as all of this was
Yeah,
playing
I
out
believe
and
you, Murdy.
Cable TV was on.
I
and
believe you, Murdy.
has a
I've
good
wanted
sense
to
of what was
visit
in Trump's
China.
mind. Scavino
I have two
would
cousins
not
who
want
are
to
fluent in
testify.
Mandarin
He would be a
Chinese
hostile witness.
because
He
the
would
school that
say
they,
that
the
his
schools
comments
they've
were
gone
protected by
to.
executive privilege.
I'm sure a lot of
because
capitalists
he
are
was
under the
giving the
impression
president candid
that
advice. And then you
China
actually could
will
end up
become
going
one of
into
the
a
newer
court proceeding, you know, where
ruling
because
powers
Chief
in terms
Justice
of
John
going
Roberts
forward
is
in the
overseeing
world.
this trial. It goes
the
to
way
courts
that
and
other
it gets bogged
countries
down and
treat
dragged out. And so that's
the
why
English
Democrats
language
don't
and
want to
how important
call
knowing
people
English
from the
is
White
in other
House who are
countries.
material
I feel
witnesses.
like a
And
lot
instead,
of
they
people
want
here in
Jamie
America
Butler,
are starting
who's
to feel that
not
way
a
about
hostile
Mandarin
witness,
Chinese.
because
like,
you know Jamie Raskin, who's
being able to speak
when he was in
Chinese,
the
basically.
Maryland State Senate before he got elected to Congress, he was famous for playing multiple chess games in the basement of the Maryland State Capitol in Annapolis, and he would go and play
yeah,
6
Murdy.
people
I
in
believe,
chess
yeah,
at once
Han
and beat
chauvinism.
all of
Yeah,
them.
I'm familiar with
And
that for
it
sure.
does feel
for
like
sure.
Jamie's trying to play some chess here. here. That he's thought through kind of how this would play out and how the Republicans would
See,
likely
I'd heard
respond to
that,
what,
but I didn't
he
know
tried
how
to
true
do.
that
We don't know
was
if he
because,
talked to
there's a
Laura
lot of
Butler
Western
before he
propaganda,
did
so
this
you
surprise
got to be
thing.
skeptical.
We do know
You got to be
that some
skeptical of
sorry,
everything
I
you
didn't mean
read
to cut you off.
about
We do
China
know.
and Russia.
We do know that some of
and,
the Democrats, when they were
Cuba
walking into the
and
chamber
North Korea and
2
stuff,
minutes before this started, said there weren't going to be
all
witnesses
that
and
here in
there weren't
America.
the votes for witnesses.
But
So
yeah,
this was
I could
something- this is
certainly
kind of
see
a
how
move. This
that
is sort of a
conspiracy
gambit
theory would come
that
about.
Raskin sort of sprung in some ways on even these Democratic senators. So
yeah, it's important to point
Just
out
because
that
of how it
you
came
see,
about here in
Trump's
America, you know what I mean?
attorneys
There's
having conversations with
an
the
entire
Republicans.
the president
James,
of the United
Democrats can also have
States
conversations with the House
kind
managers,
of
course.
kickstarted that
But
conspiracy
our colleague
theory
Annie Linsky
that
is pointing out on Twitter
China is somehow
another reminder from
responsible
someone who
for
covered Jamie Raskin in the
COVID-19
Maryland State
escaping
House.
to
You
the
can
world
play
at
multiple
large.
games of chess at once and win them all. So this idea of Jamie Raskin playing a game
Thanks
of
for
chess
the follow,
and not
Marty.
necessarily looping in the Democratic colleagues in the Senate, you know, this is the impeachment manager's job, and so they may be deciding to carry out their job the way they best see fit. I do want to bring Rhonda Colvin into the conversation. You know, we're learning more about sort of how the relationships on the Senate floor are playing out right now and where the areas of tension are. And we are hearing from our colleague Sungmin Kim that there are some real moments of tension and argument happening on the Senate floor as everyone tries to figure out sort of what the next steps forward are.
Yeah, and I think that illustrates that this was a bit unanticipated by both sides, really, that they probably were setting up for a shorter day or at least a wrap up to this trial moving forward. We talked earlier about how Democrats have wanted this to not be prolonged.
They told doctors in
in
Wuhan not to report it. I mean, to a certain level, that's understandable. Like, just like with Chernobyl, I'm sure the bureaucracy and wanting to preserve the image on the world stage would prevent
So I think that
them
this is so
from
interesting
coming
because
out
this is a
and
developing story
saying
that
just
we
how
really can't
serious
forecast just yet until we get some
a
further
disaster, or in
details.
this case,
But
a
it is showing
disease would
that
be
this was
if there was a
not,
firm
very
belief
planned,
that they
everyone
could keep
sort
it
of
in
had their
house
idea
and
of how
deal
the
with
state
it
was
before
going
the
to
world
go.
at large
So it
really
almost
understood
seems a bit of a
the
scramble,
magnitude
which may be
of it.
good
But,
and bad because
you know,
it's a scramble. You may
sometimes
not be getting enough time to
that's
what credible
counterintuitive
witnesses may help
because
your side.
you
may
cost
just
people
want to,
lives when you do
you know,
that.
pick a few that might work for you and go with that, but they may not be your strongest testimonies. Really.
Yo, what up, Marlon Brown? I'm sure it's cold out there.
This could
I love
foreseeably
Chicago.
be a time where you could see them
Chicago's a
calling
different type of
in,
cold.
Capitol
Chicago is
officers
where
who
it's
can
so
detail
cold,
what they
the ice isn't even
experienced,
slippery,
on
right?
the level of this
Chicago's
being a
where you spit
premeditated
and your
attack
spit
that,
freezes before it hits the
started
ground and
as
it
people were
bounces.
coming from the ellipse. You can talk to staffers who had to barricade, and
The
you can
Windy
also bring in
City, they
other
call it.
members of the Senate and the House to discuss what they went through. So this is certainly, the details are still coming forward.
Let's go now to senior congressional.
Malvern, are you a
joining us
pagan?
by
I
phone.
believe are you a
TK,
heathen,
what can you
as
tell
they
us
say?
about what kind of a surprise this may have been to members of this Senate jury?
Yeah, I'm sure it snows like shit out there,
just
Big
sorting
Richard Lizard
through all
Man.
the reporting that all of us congressional reporters have been doing and sharing via Pool, to give it a sense of how surprising this was.
You're a Hellenic witch.
Let me
Okay,
read three
okay,
different
that's
senators,
cool.
all from the
That's
very
cool.
liberal end of things.
What
you know,
is
very
the
anti-Trump,
word cult not in
Democratic
like the
senators.
negative
Moments
sense,
before
but
the trial
in
began,
you
so
know
between 9:50
the
and 10 a.m.
religious historical sense? What
Dick
cult would you
Blumenthal,
consider yourself a
Connecticut.
part
My
of?
advice right now
What's
is
your
this case is so
your
powerful.
prime goddess
Everybody
or
knows that
god?
Donald Trump didn't give a damn about anybody in this building or his vice president, even though he was in mortal danger. The evidence is so powerful already in the record. I don't know that they need them. They, being the managers.
That's
need
wild
them.
about Australia, Murdy.
Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, to our Washington Post Mike DeBonis. I think they made such a strong case. If I thought that additional witnesses.
Now you're
If
good,
I thought that
Big
any
Richard
further
Lizard Man. We're
witnesses
talking
would
about
change
whatever
any
right now because we're just
Republican
waiting for
mind,
this shit to
I'd
get back
say
underway
go for it,
because
but I
now
don't
they
think
gotta
so.
gather their witnesses.
Elizabeth Warren, around the same time, while saying that she would.
Yeah, I
defer
knew.
to
So I know what the
managers,
term occult
Warren
is.
said,
So, as you can see, you
otherwise,
might not be
I
able to
think
see my
the case has
tattoos
already
here,
been made
but
pretty clear that Donald Trump knew what he was doing and inciting a riot, and that he wanted.
I
people to
considered
riot.
myself a
I think this is
demonologist
further
for a
evidence of
pretty
that.
brief
It
period of
strengthens
time,
a
so I'm
case
familiar
that
with the
was
term
already
occult.
undeniable.
I was using
These are
the
two of
term
the most
cult
liberal
to ask,
senators,
like,
very anti-Trump senators, who clearly at 9:50,
which
9:55
if you had a
walked onto
specific
the Senate
deity
floor
that you
believing
had
that there would be no witnesses called,
that
and they would
you
be moving
worshipped, I
towards
guess
a-
I'm not sure if that's
a
the proper
final
word,
vote,
but if you had
today. And that
a
they
specific
expected the
deity that
vote
you
to,
venerated
have a
above all the
majority
others,
of
that's
to
more what I
convict,
went
but not
meant
the
by that
two-thirds
line of questioning.
majority fully convict.
Apollo, Ares, and Aphrodite
and
are your
they got
patrons and
thrown a
matron.
curveball.
Okay.
There's something happened today, last night and today, and it was a breach between
This
the
is
House managers and
Boer,
leadership. Chuck Schumer
Stolas,
really
and
mismanaged
Renov.
this entire process by he
for
wanted
myself,
to avoid
my mother, and
looking
my
like
father.
He was going soft on Trump.
I'm sure you know what this is.
But
Invocation
Schumer really
circle.
just wants to get on with the Democratic agenda. He really wants to pass a legislative.
You have a
COVID
dumb but
relief
real
package
question.
that
What
will
books
send
can you
checks
buy to help
directly
you get a better
to,
understanding of politics?
most American voters.
So
And
here's the thing
he
about
gave a line to everyone.
I don't really have an answer for you there, Marlon Brown. The only thing I could say is definitely read more theory. Read people like Angela Davis and Bell Hooks. Pay attention to people from history like Fred Hampton, people in the Black Panther Party for self-defense. I consider myself. You would probably follow me under the category of communism.
They had never gotten to the
So
core
if you're looking
question
for a
of
book,
every
try out
presidential scandal going back to
Das
Watergate.
Kapital
What did the president
from Marx,
know, and when did he know it?
just straight up Marx.
And that has been this dispute.
And in terms
Bill
of
Cassidy
that
of
relating
Louisiana told
to
me,
black people, definitely
yesterday morning,
read some
that was
Mao.
the central issue for him.
Some of the
He
things that
wanted
Mao
to have
wrote
the
about
question answered.
communism and socialism.
What did President know
Because
that
I
Vice
believe
President was,
that in
steps
terms
away
of the black
from
diaspora,
mortal wounds? Did
we
he know
have
that the Senate was
to.
in danger and being
I believe the
evacuated?
most beneficial
And the
ideology to
trial
blacks
defense
is Marxism,
of Donald
Leninism,
Trump, his
Maoism
lawyers
in terms
gave a
of
terrible
like
answer to that
Pan-Africanism
question. They gave
and
no
us
answer at
uniting as a
all. They left it
diaspora,
completely confused and up in the
which
air
goes
as to
hand
whether
in
Trump
hand
knew
with
about,
uniting with the working
knew the
class
danger
as a
of this
whole
attack.
internationally around the world,
And
so
that
that
opened
we
the
can
door
end a lot of
to
these
people
hegemonical
who
systems
are
of exploitation
anti-Trump,
that
including
exist
Jane
in
Herrera,
America as well as other countries.
Butler of Washington State, a Republican, who voted to impeach
Yeah,
Trump,
Leninism
and
calls for a
she
one-party
basically
state,
had been
but
telling her hometown
so
press for
communism
2
is
weeks
a classless,
about this
stateless,
call
moneyless
with Kevin
society.
McCarthy,
So, just
in
like
which
you
McCarthy
to get from
outlined for
feudalism
lawmakers just how
to
awful Trump was
socialism, you need
towards the
capitalism
fear of what was happening in
because
the
you
Capitol.
kind of.
And once that
It's very hard
lead-
to eliminate that
once it
profit
went
incentive
from the
mindset
small-town Washington State press
that exists.
into the
So
national
for a
and
lot of the
international press,
innovations and technologies and
became the
stuff, you
managers
kind of
went,
want
"Oh,
capitalism
wait a
for that.
second,
But then once you
we
have
now
all of
have
that, in order to
obvious
have
witness to call."
equitable
And that set up
distribution
this
of
scenario
those
where the
technologies
House
and
managers
things, you
come in
need
today saying,
socialism.
"Yeah, we want a witness.
And then
We
once
want
you
at
have
least one
socialism and you
witness,
have a system
Congresswoman,
set up
the
of,
Republican from
automation
Washington State.
and technology and all that
now,
stuff set up
nobody
decently,
like this,
then you move to
totally
communism because
organic
everybody has
moment.
their needs
These Democrats went
needs
into the
met,
floor
and you don't
today
really need
expecting to not
money
even
or.
vote on witnesses,
I'm
to have a motion that would
I'm
go
an
straight to
abolitionist, so
closing
I'm
arguments.
anti-police,
Once Grassley stood up and
anti-prison,
asked for witnesses,
all of that stuff.
they were stuck.
So
They were hamstrung because
this is
Schumer
just
had
my,
set them
like I
up for
said,
weeks
I'm a college
with this
dropout, so
answer of,
my
"We will defer
understanding
to
of
the
all this
managers. We
literally
will
comes
defer to the
secondhand
managers." Well, the managers asked
from
for
reading
witnesses,
about people
and
like
now
Fred
they've got
Hampton,
them,
Malcolm
and
X,
nobody knows what the next
Angela
steps
Davis,
are in
card-carrying
this process.
communist. Rosa
Nobody knows
Parks'
what the
husband
next
was a
steps are in this
card-carrying
process.
communist.
Well,
He was a
okay,
member of
just
the
when
Communist Party of
you think you
America,
have
the
Congress
CPA.
figured
Not
out,
many people
everything
know that.
changes. How long have you been doing this job?
Well, if you
A lot of the
consider
Black
the
Panthers, like Huey
7 years or
Newton,
so at roll call, this is,
worked
20,
directly
21 years
with
of
the
just
Communist Party here in America,
focused
and
entirely
also
on
had
Congress.
got guidance
So-
from
And
Chairman
you can
Mao.
still see
And
curveballs
there was
happen.
support
So,
by
PK,
Chairman Mao
important to remind
of
our
the Black
viewers
liberation
that
struggle here in
even
America.
though Mike
Howard Zinn, all
Vanderveen,
caps,
Trump's
yes.
lawyer, threatened to subpoena 100 witnesses.
Definitely
and have
Marlon
them
Brown.
brought to
Read Howard Zinn.
Philadelphia
Howard Zinn is
to,
a
be
great starting.
deposed.
Let me
It's
look
not
this
up
up.
to him.
Just make sure I'm
It's
getting
up
the
to
title right. I
Senate.
think it's the
Senate gets to
workers.
decide
Yes.
which witnesses and how many.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. This is up to the Senate now, and it always was. I mean, with Schumer's
He died in
messaging
2010.
line, the reason it was so
But,
stupid was that this has always been up to the senators. It has never been
Read
up to the
Howard
House
Zinn's A
managers.
People's History of the
Witnesses
United
are
States.
always
That's what it's
called
called.
by the
Definitely
Senate.
read Howard
The
Zinn's A People's History of the
subpoenas,
United
if they do
States.
bring witnesses, are
That's a
voted on
good
and
starting
approved
point.
by the Senate.
What's up,
So it
Ariel
is
Ghost?
up
Good to see
the
you.
majority of the Senate to decide what witnesses they want. And now the reality is,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have a
thank you.
group
You
of
type it in the chat,
54
Justin.
who have
I'm just being a
voted
bad streamer right
affirmatively
now
with
and
the
not reading chat so
managers
much.
to call witnesses. The 55th vote is Lindsey Graham. Discount Lindsey Graham because he changed his vote to yes.
Yeah, direct democracy
merely
is
because
that's
he's
really
on
and that's
Trump's side, and Graham wanted
yeah,
he thought
direct
that maybe if
democracy.
this was the only vote on witnesses. He wanted
And
to
that's
vote
part
yes,
of nihilism that I
Lindsey
disagree
Graham
with
wants
as
to call
well,
100 witnesses,
which is what
just
ends up
like,
leading to
Trump's
fascism.
defense
And a lot of
So now you
authoritarians believe
have
this
the
as
other
well, especially.
54 who
And
voted
I don't
yes
blame authoritarians
are
for believing this
essentially
because of how
their own
propagandized and
portion
stupid a
of
lot
the
of
jury
Americans
pool.
are.
They get
But
to decide
the
what
the
witnesses
concept is that essentially you
will come
can't have
forward
direct
now.
democracy
They
because the
can.
people are not
We
smart
could
enough
have like a
to vote in
slow
their own
process
interest.
whereby they vote
But I
one
don't
by
personally
one,
believe that.
or they
I
could
believe that
essentially pass a new resolution
you can have direct
that would
democracy and have it
govern the
work.
rest
You
of
just
the
need
trial, and it could specify
infrastructure
how
so that
which
people can
witnesses are
make
going to be
informed
called.
decisions
Is it
about their
just
own
James
lives.
Herrera Butler? Is it are there a few
And
others?
yeah, I no longer use chaos magic
You
because
know,
that shit fucked my life up.
think
So I can't say I would
we
recommend it.
are stuck here where nobody expects. You know, usually you have this planned out so that you knew going in you were going to get witnesses, so there already would have been a resolution drafted, and you know you'd move to that right now. But
Americans are only dumb because they don't focus on education. That's true.
Theater,
That's true. We
you're
need to spend more on
stuck, and
education
they
in the
have
military.
to,
Yeah,
this could
that's
take
true.
hours
We won't
to
give
get
up our
to map
military
out
dominance
the
either. That's
next,
facts. But to get back to your statement about one party system, never relinquishing party, I actually agree with you on that.
Of senators who oversee.
That's why I'm
just one or two
anti-authoritarian, is
depositions,
because
what they did in 1999,
I believe
two
that
senators and the House managers and the Bill Clinton
and
defense
I'll
team
quote, who's it,
went and
Abraham
deposed
Lincoln? It's
3
it's funny I'm
witnesses.
quoting
It took
him,
a
but
week
power
to do.
corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Or the other
Once you
option
have that level of
is,
power
and this would
and
take
you
consent from
can
Republicans to do,
essentially
and I'm not sure they'll
organize and
agree
schedule
to get
people's
along,
lives
go along
for
with this.
them, that's
The other
very,
option
very
they could have done at the outset of
intoxicating
this
levels
trial
of
would have been to simply
control.
form a
You know what I
trial
mean?
committee
So there has to be some
and
kind of
at the
sunset clause,
outset,
I guess,
and
if
let
we're going to
them
move towards a
do all
one-party
the legal
system.
scut work and all the depositions and everything.
Otherwise, you risk
from the beginning,
becoming like a
while
Stalin
the rest of the Senate
USSR
went about
or
doing its
a
business,
Kim
and
DPRK
then have the trial committee come
or
in and
a
present
Dengist China. You know what I mean?
depositions and witnesses,
So you have to
testimony,
actually be
video
making
testimony if they
efforts
need
to
any of
move
it.
towards communism
They
if you're
could have
in
done
a
that from the
socialist
outset. That's what
one-party
has
state.
often been done in judicial impeachment trials. But now, you know, you're stuck. The trial has already begun. To pause the trial and to move into any
I
sort
agree
of
with that too, Murdy.
legislative
Incremental
business,
progress
they
is
have to have
good.
a consent
So
agreement.
I
And
have
I
two
don't think
positions on that.
Republicans at this stage probably won't agree.
Like I said before, I'm a pragmatist, so I understand
if they
that certain
consent
things
to go
take
back
time
into legislative
and there's an
business,
order of operations
that's
to
gonna
things.
be the partisan,
But at the same time,
$1.9 trillion COVID relief bill.
I have the Malcolm X
So
position, right?
they're not gonna
In terms of
want to
abolitionism,
let the
where you
Democrats
can't plunge a
move to
knife
that
into my back
legislative
8
package.
inches,
I
pull
think
it out
could
4
be
inches, and
stuck
call
here
that
in limbo
progress.
for
You have to pull the
a
knife
bit.
completely out and dress the
Senior
wound
congressional correspondent
and
Paul King,
actually
thank you
deal with
so
the damage
much,
that has been
for
done.
joining us. Really appreciate it, and you can continue to read the reporting of.
And I agree,
all of our
fast-tracking
other
communism
congressional
usually
correspondents.
leads
Some
to
of them
bad
are on
outcomes.
Capitol Hill right
That's
now,
true.
At WashingtonPost.com.
Because
You can have
people
an
get
ongoing
very
live blog, and we'll continue to
emotional
bring you the latest
in terms
just what they are
of,
sharing with us. Rhonda
you
Colvin.
know, like
we
you
are
see it all
hearing
the time.
this
People
from our
joking
colleagues who've
about
been able to be inside the
Kulaks
Senate
deserved
chamber,
it and stuff.
that
Like
senators, including Romney
I
and
actually,
Ron
like I
Johnson
said,
of
I'm not a
Wisconsin
nihilist, so
were in
I
a
place
heated
value on
argument,
human life.
as this call for
And
witnesses threw everything into chaos. So
I believe in reform first and
this
foremost.
was, as
So
Paul Kane just shared with us, a curveball.
that said, in
You know,
terms
Democrats are
of
having to adjust, but
self-defense,
also Republicans are having to
sometimes
scramble and adjust
you
right now,
have to
Rhonda.
take the extreme position when you're talking
That's
about
right. And,
people
you know, of course, we
that
don't know
are
what the
putting your
focus of
entire
their
way of life
argument
in
might have
jeopardy.
been, but it does show you
If someone
how
tries to kill me,
anticipated
I'm
this
going to try
was.
to kill them
And
back.
I
You know what I
keep
mean?
saying that, and also this long pause is also illustrating that
And
point too.
that's not an advocate. That's not
everyone's trying to
advocacy
figure
for
out the next
violence. That's
move
not
forward
me
because
telling
they
you
thought they
guys to
had
go
the
out
day
and kill
already
people. That's
figured
not
out.
me saying that I want to
think
kill people.
Republicans,
It's just saying
you know, may
that
direct some anger
self-defense
Mr. Romney, as well as
is
the other
perfectly
Republicans who
reasonable,
voted to call witnesses, because you know, that may not have been the wish of
sometimes
the
certain
Congress.
actions need to
However,
be
you also have
taken
Lindsey
to
Graham a part of that
defend
vote,
the
too.
populace.
So I think right now they're all trying to
And that's
readjust,
you're exactly
refigure
right. That's
out
what
the next
you don't
few
want the
days
French
look
Revolution
like.
where you're just chopping
And,
people's heads off,
I think the Republicans
because
left last night, at least the
that leads to really bad
Republicans
outcomes
who
as
had said they were
well.
opposed to conviction.
And
They
it's
left
obviously
last
just
night,
in terms of optics, just a bad
feeling
look.
that
It's really
the
hard to
defense
convince
team did
people
a pretty good
that
job at sort
your
of changing the
ideology
tone,
is the
that
way to
the
move
Senate
forward
spent
for
a few days
humanity
this week
when you're
really
fucking cutting
in,
people's heads off, right?
emotionally grappling with the images that the impeachment managers shared, and then yesterday we had a very quick defense argument that this
But
was about
I am a
free
prison
speech
abolitionist.
and not about,
I believe
what Trump
that
was doing after
we should
or during
defund
the
and
riot.
abolish the
It's
police.
about,
We should
the,
defund and
beginning
abolish
and the provoking.
prisons.
So I think Republicans
Because
felt like they
the
could lead
argument,
on a note of this is already summed up, but this
people,
is such
it's
a
another one of those
curveball.
things where it's not
I
a
think
binary
that argument that our colleagues are saying is happening,
issue,
or those tense
right?
words
People
between,
think that prison is
Romney and
either for
others is
reform
just evidence that,
or for
no one
punishment,
was really prepared
and
for this,
it's really
and it is
neither,
forcing the
right?
Republicans to figure out
Obviously,
the next best steps, because if we had
you
ended
want to
today,
reform people that
it
have
looks very much like an acquittal
deviant behaviors,
and a quick acquittal.
but the point
now,
of
even,
those
that
systems is
two-thirds
to
vote might
remove
still be
people
hard to get
who are
to. This is
potentially
at least
harmful to
showing
society at
that
large
witnesses could bring in a whole new
from
element
that
to this
society
trial that was
and
unexpected.
isolate them, not isolate them in terms of like solitary confinement or whatever, but isolate them as in put them in an area where you can concentrate on their reform without them being a danger to society. And you don't need the current system of prison to do that. You know what I mean? If we look at like Sweden's prison system, where like people like murderers can leave prison, can go to college. They
also could have
the
tried
emphasis
to
is
answer the questions in
on
the Q&A period,
making
the
them
actual
into
Q&A
functioning
period.
members of society.
But they didn't. They
Yes,
either
I'm against the death
obfuscated,
penalty. The
changed
death penalty needs to be
subject, or
abolished. I
blamed
feel like anyone
impeachment
with
managers and what they
two
called a
brain
quick
cells,
timeline and lack of discovery
anyone with half
for
a
their
brain
own
and a
ability
quarter
to
of a
answer
heart
questions about
should be
Donald
for
Trump's
death penalty
activities and state of
abolition.
mind.
Yeah, Libby, this is what happens when you hire a personal injury lawyer to represent you in an impeachment trial. These people aren't constitutional scholars.
Scandinavia, yep,
this
you said
level.
it, you said it.
They
I wasn't
do
reading
kind of
chat,
due
and I said the
diligence
same
stuff. They
thing.
have billboards and run
But
TV
yep,
commercials in Philadelphia. saying if you get in
I
a
believe
car
killing
accident,
is wrong
call us.
unless in
These aren't
self-defense.
impeachment lawyers. These
And
aren't,
I
experts
also have
at
a pretty
this.
strict definition
And
of self-defense
there
as
is
well.
no doubt that their strategy
What games do I
yesterday,
play? So the main game that I play, people come to watch
length
me
of
play, is
their
Mortal Kombat
defense, but
11.
the stone
I
line
have been grinding,
created the
getting better and
situation.
better, trying to
If they had
become
given
a
some kind of
world-class
timeline,
competitor
if they
in
had
Mortal
given
Kombat
some
11.
detail on what the
Last year, I
president was
won my
doing,
first
even
tournament
if they
around
had
this time of
emphasized
year,
the things the
actually, in
president
February
did
of last
later in
year.
the
I won
day.
my first local tournament.
All of that would have
I've
sort of
had some really
prevented
good back-and-forth
this
matches with
from
some heavy
becoming
hitters
a
in the
big
FGC
issue.
community now. FGC, it's like I
Their
said,
sort of
ATM
refusal
machine.
to say
Yeesh.
anything,
But
their attacks on the House impeachment managers,
I've had some good back and
clearly,
forths with
in
people
some ways
like
provoked,
Mighty Unjust and
people like
Emperor
Raskin to say,
Aztec,
okay, well, then let's call
MF
a
Slayer.
Republican member
I'm
of
part of
Congress as a
MF
witness,
Slayer's
if that's
community
the
and his
argument that
channel,
you're
and
gonna
I've
make.
played matches on his channel and
then I
stuff.
think
Had some good back and forths with people there.
Specifically,
But I
when it
really
came to
would
these
like to
Republican senators
become
who were on the fence, refusing to give anything to
maybe not
Susan
Evo
Collins,
champion,
Lisa Murkowski,
because
or Mitt
there's
Romney,
people
all three of
whose
whom asked
skill
variations
I
of the
probably will
question,
never be able
what
to
did the
touch
president
just because
know?
of how
What
much
did he know?
effort and
What did he
time they
do?
put into the game.
And
But I at least
by
want to be
not engaging at
a
all,
top
they
20
have laid the
or
groundwork
top
now
10
for there
competitor,
to be discovery
like
for these questions
Evo
to be answered, and that's why you
competitor
heard Michael
in
Vanderbeek
fighting games,
during that
Mortal Kombat 11
episode,
specifically.
kind of the surprise,
But I also play a lot of
you
first-person
know,
shooters,
he was clearly caught off
third-person
guard,
shooters.
saying it's
I
irrelevant
play Rogue Company. I
did
play
after
Apex
the
Legends. I
mob breached the
play
Capitol,
PlayerUnknown's
which is a
Battlegrounds sometimes.
argument
I
that
play
is,
Ghost Runner. Ghost
you know,
Runner is
no
one of
one
my
would say makes
Ghost
sense.
Runner is probably
Well,
my game of the year
right,
for 2020.
And, you know, most importantly, may not make sense
I
to those
play
Republicans
Dead by Daylight.
who
Dead by Daylight's
are
another game I play a lot. It's one of my
genuinely
favorite
trying to
games.
grapple with the question of should they vote to convict the President of the United States for high crimes and misdemeanors. They have asked specifically for clarification.
I
of the
agree with you
timeline
110%,
of what
Marty.
Trump was doing in those hours after the attack began to unfold.
And what's what's wild.
Yeah,
is,
I don't
when you
think
about it,
when
So
we're
obviously this
talking
was not
about
the first
determining
legal
whether
team.
someone lives or
The first legal
dies,
team was the
or the
three
trajectory
lawyers
of
from
their
South
life
Carolina who
and their
quit 2
freedom,
weekends
that
ago.
emotions
But
should come into
already
play.
these
I believe in
lawyers
restorative justice,
cost Bill
for sure,
Cassidy,
whatever that is.
who was planning to vote that the trial wasn't constitutional and couldn't move forward, and then
Oh
changed
yeah,
their vote
Malvern. We
because
play Dead by
of
Daylight
the
all the
poor
time. You
quality of
definitely
the
have someone to
president's
play
legal
with here.
defense.
I stream Dead
You
by
know, in
Daylight a lot.
real
I
court of
have
law,
a bunch of
in
people
a
I usually
traditional
play
court of
with,
law,
but
you
I'm
would
definitely
be able
down
to argue that you got bad
to
counsel as
pull you
grounds
into
for
the
an appeal.
fold,
You
and
can't argue that in an impeachment trial.
we can
but
play some
there's
games together.
no disputing that Trump has been poorly served by bad lawyering, and that is now
Deadies is fucked right now,
potentially
though. Dead by
put,
Daylight is fucked. We call it
in
Deadies.
jeopardy. There are
But
a
yeah,
couple of
Deadies is fucked right
Republicans, once
now.
you
The
open
hitboxes
this
are fucked up.
box,
Whatever update they
once you
did
have
pretty
more
much
witnesses,
broke the game.
Who could really speak
in my
to
experience.
the president's callousness.
Yeah,
to
Dead by
January
Daylight is
6th,
cross-platform,
that
Malvern.
could establish his
Because
general
I play on
election duty.
PC, but my
You
friends
could
play on
lose a
PlayStation
few more
4.
votes, and
They
it's
changed the
it's
UI and
sort
the
of amazing
hitboxes
because
are
every
definitely
lawyer
goofed.
typically would be thrilled at the chance to represent a client who almost certainly can't lose in court. You know,
You're a
they
noob,
only
but
had
that's
to get
cool. We'll
34
backpack you.
Republicans.
We're
but in
definitely
this case,
experienced
they're literally
survivors.
in real time.
And Fade
watching,
Runner is a sweat
themselves
killer,
lose
so.
members of the jury, or at least alienate them.
Me, I just
Kicking
face
around the
camp.
LBJ room on
I face
Capitol
camp and
Hill,
slug
that
all
is
day.
where
Toxic
Trump's
killer.
team has
Don't
been
even care.
preparing. So just a little while ago, we saw the defense team leave that LBJ room, and they did not stop for comment. But when asked about witnesses, Bruce Castor says they'll call lots.
Yeah, Murdy, you gotta be against war. War solves absolutely nothing.
Bruce Castor telling a journalist that they'll call
I feel like
lots.
if you
A
are against
reminder,
killing
though,
people, you
that
gotta
it's
be
not
against
up to
war.
them. They can propose who
Like all
they'd
forms
like
of
to hear
war,
from
too,
and put
like
names out there.
trade
but Ron
war,
DeKalvin, it's ultimately up to the senators in this
cyber
room,
warfare,
the jury, to
like all that.
decide
It's silly.
specifically which
Country, we should be
witnesses
working
they deem
together.
relevant.
Like cooperation is the name of the game for humanity.
That's correct. And also earlier, right before they took that vote, if you remember, Mr. Vander Veen talked about that this is not civic process, and he was sort of attacking the process.
Aries would disagree, yeah. And that also goes into self-defense, Malvern. There's certain things that will go into the category of war that I do support. I support the slave rebellion in Haiti. I support any slave rebellion.
And it doesn't go by the rules
there's
of such. It goes by rules that were agreed upon by both parties. They were voted on just this past Monday.
And yep, you would address that, Murdy.
Rules of this impeachment. And a part of the rules were that they would, after the opening arguments concluded,
you work with Aries to stick up for yourself? Yeah, that's cool.
That's what we're seeing right
now.
That's
very cool.
Stand out to me as sort of seeing his frame of mind and thinking that he may not have anticipated Jamie Raskin's move there, even though the defense team did say they'd call witnesses if that's what the Senate wanted, but it just didn't seem like it was part of their thinking of how this day would play out.
They definitely called their bluff on that one and fucking lost. That's funny. Just to get back to what we're watching for a minute. As I understand it,
very quickly. And we heard one of Trump's lawyers yesterday even say, we're going to wrap up soon.
Jamie
because we
Raskin
want you all to get back to the COVID relief bill.
asked to call a vote so that they could present witnesses. Donald Trump's defense said, oh, if you want to call witnesses, we'll call witnesses too. And I'm not sure if he didn't think that the vote would pass or what, but yeah, the vote passed. Now they're calling witnesses, and it looks like Donald Trump's defense now are like, fuck, what do we do
I'm
now?
looking at our monitors to see who's
Which
doing what at
is
this moment. Journalists are taking a photograph there.
Hilarious
So
because,
we'll see.
like I said,
one of the journalists
like
who's
Jamie
there,
Raskin said,
it's
realistically,
important to point out that the Hill
the
reporters
defense
have
only
done
needs
really,
one witness,
an
but he's
impressive
in
job of collaborating and
Florida
working
golfing
together
right
during this
now,
unprecedented, difficult time of covering
complaining
Capitol
about
Hill
cancel
during
culture.
COVID safety protocols, and so we are getting a lot of great pooled information.
I do
as
have a Discord,
journalists
Malvern.
cycle through and take
It's a
turns
community
being in
Discord.
Important places of relevance.
I don't
because
really
they
talk
we
about
can't
politics
have
a
just,
whole
like, the
lot
huge
there.
scrums
I'll
of
probably
reporters
establish
that
my own
we've all
Discord
grown
for
accustomed
that,
to on
for like
Capitol Hill
talking
because of
about
safety
politics
issues
and
right
religion
now.
and stuff. But right now, I just
This
have a
was
gaming
the
community
pre-COVID
Discord
era,
with
you
my
would see
friends
far more
Sock and
reporters
Senshi
in that area
and
right
Rexky.
now. In fact, a few years ago, the gallery put out recommendations that we don't gather too closely because we could trip up senators, and many of them are in elder age, and that was a real threat. There
I
were
don't
so many
think Marjorie
reporters here
Taylor
on the-
Greene will be a
on the Hill
witness.
during the
I
Trump
would
era
say
that,
Rudy
it
Giuliani,
endangered a lot of
probably.
these members because there were so many. But now you really cannot gather in most places. Scrums are discouraged, and we do rely on a rotating pool colleagues that are able to go in there and get some details and share that with the rest of the world, much like, the campaign season as well.
Yeah, I do, Malvern. I'm in a community Discord it's a gaming Discord though, so we don't really talk about. It's not that it's not allowed. It's just that the people on there really don't that much, so we don't really talk about religion and politics there. But I do have a Discord. It's a gaming community Discord. At some point, I will establish my own Discord that will be for like discussion of politics and religion and stuff like that. But for right now, it's just that gaming community Discord that I'm in.
And Mark Kelly, we've sort of seen these clusters gathered around, and if only to be a fly on the wall, Rhonda, to hear exactly what everyone's saying. But we don't have control over those cameras, so we can only see sort of the folks who've gone into the line of sight of this camera that is controlled by Congress. You can see Rand Paul there choosing to be maskless despite the dangers that he poses to other human beings in that chamber. I also want to point out and bring James into the conversation. We did see Jason Miller come out and show something to those journalists, a few moments ago.
And in fact, we as you noted, Frank Thorpe was there. I saw John Bresnahan was there. So I was looking to see what they were taking pictures of it, what they tweeted out, and what it was is a picture that Jason was holding, and it's clearly for show, and it was intentional. They wanted it to be seen, but it says witness list 301 so far, and they're just scratching out potential names of random people that they could call. People who were
involved. You're pretty much nailing it directly
really
on the head,
Murdy.
You're hitting the nail right on the head.
Drag this out as long as possible, derail President Biden.
There's a system of hegemony
and Jason Miller was
in the world,
top strategist
and George Bush said
Ironically,
it. He said you're either with us or you're against us. So America has a very fatalistic view in terms of their foreign policy,
side of things,
outside of just straight up imperialism, of course.
Page of our newspaper today, or I guess paper
the American
Miller
foreign policy is what
Trump's defense lawyers
radicalizes
came in after
people.
finishing their case. So the
actions
from the Trump team
of
here seems to be
America in terms of its foreign policy directly led to 9/11 and directly led to the emergence of IS.
They're afraid of witnesses. They're afraid of opening the door to have people who could, they feel like they have the votes that they need.
The allies, because their economies depend so heavily on the petrodollar and being on America's good side,
politically.
They will only raise the most meager and toothless challenges to American hegemony.
Quorum call as they negotiate the number of witnesses, who those
part of that
witnesses
is
could be, and the rules of the
also,
trial.
of course, due to
in the meantime,
a
can you
little
tell
bit
our
of
viewers about Congresswoman
xenophobia and
Butler,
Russophobia,
who was
you know what I mean?
the first name mentioned.
People
by
are comfortable
lead
with
impeachment
America
manager
being in
Jamie
charge
Raskin
because
this morning.
We're the
Libby. So Jamie Herrera Butler,
the white people.
I'm sure many people are scrambling to find out
The
exactly
English-speaking
who she is.
white
So let
people.
me give you a little introduction. She's a Republican member of the House who represents Washington's 3rd District. She was elected to the House in 2010.
Yeah, that's
part of
true,
that
Murdy.
Tea Party wave
Australia and
of
America are
Republicans
very
elected to
similar,
Congress,
and
but she represents a pretty moderate district.
culturally, for
and
sure.
Most importantly, she voted yes.
Maybe
on
not
impeachment.
politically,
She
but
was one of
definitely
only
culturally.
10 Republicans who did so. On the House floor that day,
There's
she
a
said,
lot of
"I'm not
animosity or
choosing
apathy
sides,
towards the
I'm choosing
military in
truth."
Australia, though.
And
Really,
in a
that's
statement
interesting
released January
because
12th, she
America is
claimed
like a
that
jingoistic
saying, quote,
hellhole where,
"The
like,
President of the United
if
States
you find
incited a
out
riot
somebody
aiming to
fucking
halt
wrote
the peaceful
reports in the
transfer
Air
of power
Force
from one administration
reserves
to the
for
next."
2 years,
She also
you gotta say
said
thank you
House
for your
Republican leader
service and
Kevin
fucking
McCarthy
let them step
described
on your
pleading
dick.
with the president to go on television and call for an end to the mayhem.
A lot of
to
people
no
there don't
avail.
like the military.
So
Yeah, it's
the
the opposite here in
impeachment managers want to
America.
call
People
her as a
love the
witness
military.
and to subpoena her notes regarding
Which
her
is crazy
conversations
because they
with
vote to get them
Minority
killed
Leader
all the
Kevin
time,
McCarthy
but
on the day of the riot.
they
And she has said that she
profess
was
their
briefed
love
on that
for the
call
military all the time.
between Trump and McCarthy.
I don't like the
in which
military
McCarthy
either.
urged the president to call off the
I
rioters,
also
but
come
said
from a
that he
military
refused.
family. I
Last night,
have
Butler also put out
my.
a statement
I was talking
urging
about the
Republicans
Urquharts
to speak
earlier.
out against the former president
My
and his
great
role in
grandfather,
inciting the riot. She said
James
in a
Perry
statement last
Urquhart,
night,
I have his
when,
World War II draft
quote,
card.
when McCarthy finally reached the
And
president on
my
January 6th
father's
and asked him to
brother
publicly and
was in the Air
forcefully call off
Force.
the riot, The president initially repeated the falsehood that it was Antifa that had breached the
My
Capitol.
mother's sister was in the
McCarthy
Air
refuted that
Force.
and told the president
One of my
that
cousins
these
was
were
also
Trump
in the Air
supporters.
Force.
That's when,
There's
according to
definitely
McCarthy,
no
the
shortage
president
of
said,
veterans
well,
in my
Kevin, I
family as
guess
well.
these people are
So I
more
don't have the
upset about
greatest
the
opinion
election
of the
than
military.
you are. Those are the words of Jamie Butler, who is the first witness who has been, maybe called in this trial. So this is the testimony, and these are the notes that the impeachment managers are hoping to introduce into this trial, evidence which certainly speaks to what Trump was doing and saying while the Capitol was under siege.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's an
Hannah Jewell
extremely
reporting for
American
us.
question.
Rhonda Colvin, let's bring you back into the conversation. If people are just tuning in because
It's
perhaps they thought
part
today
of
was a
American
foregone
culture as
conclusion,
well.
now
We
they're
have
thinking, wait a
bases
minute,
and
what's
stuff
going
all
on? I
over
need
the
to see
world.
what's happening. Tell me,
So
Washington
if
Post.
you travel a lot,
Can you
people
just,
assume that
recap
you're
for
either
us,
in the military or some kind
what the
of
reasoning is, and
high-ranking,
go a little
like,
deeper here after Hannah's comments
businessman or
about
something.
why impeachment manager Jamie Raskin wants to hear from Ms. Herrera Butler, and also what kind of a surprise this was for members of this jury.
Yes, to recap, if anyone missed it, today was about voting on whether or not to subpoena witnesses in this trial. This was a part of the rules set up by the
what's
Senate.
interesting
And
though,
after
Murdy,
the
is
Q&A
that here in
process that
America,
happened yesterday,
we have the
senators
same view
asked
of the
questions to
military.
both sides,
Like,
the
there's
defense and the
military
prosecution.
fanatics,
Then the next
but
step
all
in
of
the
the people
impeachment
here in
trial
America
was
think
to
that
vote on whether
the
or not to bring
military
witnesses into this.
just does
We,
defense.
were
Like,
told that both
that the military
sides,
defends
really
our
didn't have much
freedoms,
of an
home and
appetite to
abroad,
prolong
right?
this. Many were planning
That
for this to
if the
move
military
forward very
didn't
quickly
exist,
today and
that
end with
IS
closing
would
arguments and
come to
potentially a
their
vote
little
on
podunk
the
towns,
impeachment.
fucking
However,
Dunkin'
that is
Donuts,
not
to
what
make
happened, and
everyone
we
wear a
had
hijab
series
and recite the
of
Quran.
Republicans, some of
You know what I
them,
mean?
we expected
And-
because they're
and
part of
rape
that
everyone's
group
white
that
women.
has not confirmed whether or not they're going to vote to
It's
convict
just
or
such a
acquit Donald
bizarre
Trump,
state of
with the
affairs
addition
here in
also
America
of Lindsey Graham, who has,
that
of course, been helping out the
the
Trump defense team. So
populace-
that group of Republicans,
Yeah, people are
voted with
stupid. Yeah,
Democrats in
there's a
bringing
book.
in witnesses into
Also,
this
I don't know if Marlon
And,
Brown is still in
Jamie
here.
Raskin, who
I'd
is the lead
recommend
impeachment
reading
manager,
Howard Zinn's
brought
A
up
People's
today
History of the
that,
United
one
States, but I would
Congresswoman-
also recommend
Congresswoman
reading
Hannah
Noam
pointed out,
Noam
Representative
Chomsky's
Herrera
Manufacturing
Butler,
Consent,
has, notes and details
because
that are relevant
that also
to this
explains
issue
pretty
that's
heavily
really at the
how
core of,
people are
some of these
heavily
Republicans who are uneasy with
propagandized
this impeachment
into
right now. It's at
just
the core of
going
their
along
questions,
with
and that is,
things
what did
in
Trump know? When
America,
did he
and
know
one of
it?
those
What
things
was
is
his,
American
process of
imperialism,
mind
because
when
people
he
are
learned that Vice
convinced
President,
that
Mike Pence was
without
in
that,
danger? How was he
America
reacting to that?
would
And of
wouldn't
course,
be under
there
it.
is
It
this
be what
call
it is.
between,
America wouldn't be what it is.
Kevin McCarthy, who is the House
And I
minority
agree that the
leader, and he
education
had,
really, really
with
needs
Trump
reform in
asking him to
America.
call
But the
things
thing
off,
is
and
that
Trump
the
seemed not to
education
care.
system in
So Herrera
America
Butler has
is not.
details about that
It's a
call,
misnomer.
and,
It's not the
it's
education
also just
system. It's a
amplifying
propaganda
some of the
system.
concerns that
In
these
terms
Senate Republicans
of the
have had.
education
Their
system
questions were
for
not,
blacks
answered yesterday,
and people
that
on
they
the
wanted to
lowest rung
know
of society,
specifically
when you
within
go to
detail,
inner cities and stuff,
how
we
much
have this
Trump
thing in
knew
America
about
called
the
the
riot,
school to
what
prison
was happening.
pipeline.
The
You remember what I was
impeachment
talking about
managers have been
earlier when I
arguing
was
that
talking about
he only
slavery
needed
and
to
how
turn
the
on
prison
the
system
TV
is
or
just
the
a
radio to know
continuation of
exactly what
slavery.
all of the rest
There's
of
a book
America
called
was
The New
watching,
Jim
that the
Crow
Capitol
that's a
was,
very, very
dealing
good
with an
explanation of that as
insurrection,
well.
and that it was
Part
under
of that
siege, and,
is
apparently
making
that is
sure
something that is really,
that not
really
only do
troubling
blacks live in
to
poverty,
senators
but
like
also
Mitt
that they're not
Romney, Lisa
educated.
Murkowski, Senator
And part of
Collins.
the way that that's
They,
done
are
is to
troubled
make
that
public
the, former
education's
president did not
quality,
react quickly
and
when
their
he
funding
learned
based
that
on
Vice
property
President
tax
Pence
in the
and the rest of
area.
them were all in
And
danger.
that goes hand in hand with
Rhonda, we're
redlined
seeing
areas
Israeli
where
leader Chuck
areas where
Schumer
black people
there,
live
at
are
the-
usually
at
just
the
worth
podium,
less
and we're
money
seeing
in
senators
general,
take their
even if
seats.
they have the
So
same
let's
crime
see,
rate and the
what
same
we are
level of
about to
property
learn.
as
This
a,
is
as a
live
white
coverage
area.
from the Washington
There's
Post.
just a lot
Let's go,
of
to
so
the
much
floor.
of the problems in America
I
could be
ask
chalked
unanimous
up to
consent to initiate the
anti-blackness
quorum call.
or just white
Without
supremacy.
objections, ordered.
Mr. President, as I understand it, there are discussions underway, and objection, so I ask unanimous
Yeah, the
consent
news
to
here is
set a recess
terrible as
until
well.
12:30
Fox
p.m.
News is garbage.
Is there objection? Hearing none, we stand in recess till 12:30.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So they're going into recess until 12:30, I think. I actually kind of want to take a little break here. I don't want to sit
we have
here
a
and
recess
stream
here
this
for
whole
about
time,
45
even though we've been
minutes.
having
If you're
excellent
just tuning in,
conversation.
the impeachment trial of Donald Trump.
I think I'm
took a
gonna
dramatic
end my stream
turn
and
this
come back
morning
here
as the Senate
12:30
voted to
Eastern
call
Standard Time
witnesses
here.
and subpoena documents.
So,
So
whatever
we're in
time it
this
is for
break
you
right
now,
now, but here's what's happened today.
I'll be back on in
55
an
senators
hour.
voted yes to witnesses.
So
and that
60
included
minutes
5
from now is when
Republicans.
I'll be
Here's who
back.
they were. Republican senators. Susan
Thanks
Collins
everyone
of
for
Maine,
watching.
Lisa
Thanks for
Murkowski of
contributing to the
Alaska,
conversation.
Mitt
I
Romney
really
of
appreciate
Utah,
it all
also
with you
Ben
guys.
Sass of
Thanks for all the new
Nebraska
follows and
voted in
stuff.
favor of
Yeah,
witnesses.
it's
Now, before the vote was
11:45 here,
finalized,
so
another senator joined them. That was
12:30
Lindsey
will
Graham
be
of
in an
South
hour
Carolina.
from
That
now.
brought that
So
total
I'm gonna end my
55
stream now and come
to
back in 60
45,
minutes.
And that has thrown the rest of the
Fade.
trial timing in flux.
Stop.
Rhonda Coleman was just talking to us about how the anticipation was this would get wrapped up today. Rhonda,
Yeah,
the big
America's
news prior to
definitely
this
obsessed
was
with
that
race.
Minority Leader Mitch
But
McConnell
yeah,
had
I'm
sent
going
his
to
colleagues a letter saying
probably
that he
make
plans
myself a
to
little bit of
vote to
lunch,
acquit
grab
Donald
myself
Trump.
a drink,
And that was a significant
have a shit
development
shower and
because he
shave,
hadn't committed,
perhaps.
to that,
And
it
I'll be
sent,
back in an hour.
you know,
So
an
thanks everyone
indication
for
to all of
watching.
his
Thanks for
colleagues
contributing. Thanks for all the new
that-
follows and shares and stuff.
that there
I'll be
would
back
not
in an
be
hour,
any way, really,
and
frankly,
we'll be able
that
to
Republicans,
continue
enough
laughing
Republicans
at
would be
this
siding
shit
with
show.
Democrats to convict the president of the United
Yeah,
States.
gonna definitely have a nice
Let's talk about
sandwich.
that,
I had a
and
nice
then
bacon, egg, and cheese
this
sandwich this
potential
morning,
game
so
changer that
I might do
is
some. I
going to
might
throw
make
everything
do
up in the
some
air.
ham and cheese in a second.
Yeah,
It's
and
just gonna be a
that's,
sandwich day for
the
me.
minority
But,
leader.